The snow fell in gentle spirals that afternoon, not the biting shards of deep winter, but the powder-soft flakes of a lingering autumn that had forgotten how to die. They drifted like faded memories over the turrets of Winterfell and settled upon the ancient ramparts. Whisper quiet, as though careful not to disturb the hush that had blanketed the keep since dawn. Sansa Stark watched from an arched window in the solar once claimed by her mother. The hearth at her back sighed with embers, casting a low orange glow that could not rival the stark pallor of the courtyard below. She had always loved the first true snowfall, the way it softened even the most brutal shapes, hiding cracks and scars beneath a pure skin. Yet this morning she felt none of the childlike warmth it once stirred. Snow concealed as much as it cleansed, and the north no longer had the luxury of illusion. Outside, voices rose, blacksmiths calling for ashwood, stable boys laughing at a slip of ice, a ravener barking orders as fresh birds arrived from the east. Winterfell had come alive since the coronation mood one fortnight past, as though every bannered hall sensed that a corner of history had turned. The North had declared itself a republic, her republic, though in truth the words remained fragile things, ink upon hide and hope upon trembling lips. For 9 days she had walked these ramparts hearing the title whispered. Not queen, not lady, but chancellor. A low title to southerners perhaps. To northerners, it was the forging of a new world. She drew her cloak tighter and paced the length of the solar, trailing a hand across the stone table where parchment lay in disordered stacks. Each sheet bore revisions of the Covenant Charter, drafts inked by Samwell Tarly's patient hand, footnotes in the Archmaster's scribble, annotations from Maester Wolkan in his spare northern script. The charcoal smudges on the margins were hers, evidence of midnight hours bent over candle stubs while the keep slumbered. Charters and covenants, she thought, parchment and words. How easily they might burn if the wind turned. A soft knock sounded. Brienne entered without waiting for answer, tall and broad-shouldered, snow melting in shining beads upon the wolf's head clasp at her cloak. She bowed her head. "My Lady Chancellor," she corrected, the unfamiliar syllables awkward upon her tongue. "The lords gather in the great hall. Sir Davos has returned from White Harbor." Already, Sansa felt her heart quicken. Davos Seaworth, the Onion Knight, had been her envoy to Lord Manderley, guardian of the North's richest port and its most obstinate old lord. If Manderley accepted the charter, others would follow. If he did not, Brienne's gaze softened. "You needn't face them alone. I can—" "No." Sansa lifted her chin. "I must." She stepped toward the brazier, brushed stray soot from her fingers, and donned thick gloves of mottled gray leather. "Send word that I will address the assembly shortly. And Brienne, thank you." The knight's answering smile was brief, but genuine. "Winterfell stands with you, my chancellor." The great hall felt larger than ever, vast beams arching overhead like ribs of some slumbering behemoth. Torches guttered along the walls, their flames catching upon shields newly rehung. Karstark Sunburst, Umber Giant, Glover Knot. No lion, no stag, no rose. The direwolf alone crowned the dais, carved anew but unpainted. Its pale weirwood gleamed stark against dark stone. Beneath it, a utilitarian chair of oak, neither throne nor high seat, waited for Sansa. She paused before it, arms at her sides, and faced the circle of tables arrayed below. The lords and ladies sat not in rows, but grouped as equals around round-topped boards, a deliberate break with feudal pageantry. It still unsettled them. She saw it in the way Lord Serwyn's fingers drummed his cup, in Lady Hornwood's darting eyes. Yet this was the shape of the Republic. No dais of privilege save the one she must occupy to speak. Sir Davos stood from the Manderley cluster, snow-streaked beard bright in torchlight. "White Harbor sends its blessing," he announced without preamble. "Lord Wyman has set his seal upon the covenant and pledged ships for the coastal moot come spring. He will allow free election of harbor wardens among guildfolk, and he swears the oath of shared levy." He drew a scroll from his cloak and placed it atop the central table. Wax, blue as deep water, shone with the sigil of the merman. A low murmur rippled. Sansa heard shoes scrape, goblets clink. Lord Haley's Hornwood exhaled. A faint, shaky laugh, as though a burden he scarcely admitted had lifted. Even sour Lord Dustin permitted himself a nod. Sansa's voice carried clear. The courage of White Harbor honors us all. Yet our covenant remains lines upon a scroll until we breathe life into it. We must shape courts for justice, levies for defense, commons for trade. She paused, letting her gaze travel the assembled faces. Young Meg Mormont, barely 15 and already fierce as her aunt's memory. Dread-haired Theobald Umber, his great shoulders awkward in a hall made for smaller men. Lady Alice Karstark, slim, self-possessed, her black hair bound in a warrior's tale. This hall will draft those measures. House, rank, and lineage grant counsel. But voice belongs to every sworn citizen, highborn and low. Lord Serwyn cleared his throat. And the king's south? Baratheon sits the Iron Throne again, they say, with the Targaryen babe in the cradle. They may look north and see treason. Landing. Sansa met his eyes. A treaty wagon rides even now to King's Landing bearing the charter and our pledge of peaceful border. The South can call us rebels, or they can call us partners in trade and guardians of the neck. The choice is theirs. A silence followed, heavy with old fears. Then Davos spoke quietly. The South will count its purse before its pride. Wars are dear, and winters dearer. If the North offers grain, lumber, and safe passage, King Gendry will know a bargain. Sansa inclined her head in gratitude before addressing the assembly once more. The first task lies before us. We must shape the Chamber of the Commons, to be chosen come new moon. Samwell Tarly has brought models from Oldtown. I have them here. Samwell rose, cheeks ruddy from the long ride. He wrestled a leather satchel onto the table, flipping its clasp with clumsy haste. Designs from the free cities, charters of bravos, and, well, copies of the Old Spice Compact of the Sisters. Never ratified, but illuminating. Some chuckled. Sam flushed deeper, but pressed on, unrolling sheaves. The Bravosi Concilio uses rotating magisters to prevent any one faction gaining sway. Their ballots are... The doors at the rear banged open before he could finish. A swirl of snow-cold air followed Arya Stark as she strode in, hood thrown back, damp hair tangled crown around eyes bright with wind. She wore boiled leather cut for speed, a thin rapier riding her hip. Few Northerners had yet grown accustomed to the idea that the younger Stark daughter might come and go as she pleased, stepping through castle halls as silently as a rumor. She offered no apology, only a nod to her sister, and a swift glance around the tables, as though taking stock of exits. Sansa felt a flicker of relief. Arya's mere presence carried a weight no charter could match. Word had spread that the Night Wolf, some called her that, though rarely to her face, had returned from the far seas to watch over northern freedom. It eased restless hearts to imagine unseen daggers in darkened corridors. Arya moved to stand behind Sansa's chair, but did not sit. Her eyes lingered on Davos with familiar warmth before scanning the hall once more. Then she looked upon Sansa, and her nod, for all its brevity, was approval. Sansa turned back to the assembly. Master Tarly will head a committee to craft electoral writs. The Lords of Carhold and Last Hearth will oversee distribution among their bannermen. By midwinter we will have registries of all free brothers and sisters of the North who claim voice. There will be dissent and hardship, yet our choice is clear. To stake our claim upon consent, or to cling to crowns forged in blood long spilled. She breathed, felt the tremor of her own ribs. 5,000 faces might as well have stared at her, not 50. The North is no longer a kingdom. It is a republic. Remember that when you ride home through the snows. Teach it to your daughters and your stable hands alike, lest they forget the cost of silence. Late that night, after torches guttered low, and the charter committee bent over vellum in the silent library, Sansa escaped to the Godswood. The moon glimmered upon the thin crust of snow, painting spectral lines between black branches. The air tasted of iron and pine. Her breath rose in little silver clouds. She paused beneath the heart tree, its bloody face half hidden beneath frost. It had always unnerved her, yet tonight, its presence felt almost companionable. The old gods, whatever they were, had seen every crown placed upon stark brows. Let them see its unmaking too. Footsteps crunched behind her. Arya slipped from shadow, silent until she chose to be heard. She leaned a shoulder against the heart tree, arms folded. I missed the speeches. You always do. Sansa's smile was quick, fond. It was little more than lists and seals. So the fat merman bent the knee after all. No one bends knees anymore. Sansa touched a branch heavy with snow. But yes, Lord Wyman signed. Arya sniffed. He signs whatever he thinks will keep ships fat with cargo. Not a bad instinct. Have you eaten? I forgot. The admission felt childish, yet honest. The weight of parchment had stolen her hunger. Arya reached inside her cloak and passed a strip of dried boar. Rickon's favorite, or so Davos claims. I never tasted it. Sansa chewed slowly, savoring the salt, letting it ground her. Thank you. Arya watched her with head cocked. You look tired even from the back of the hall. We are writing law where none existed. Every line breeds 10 questions. Sam's quills break faster than we can sharpen them. Then rest, Arya said simply, as though it were the easiest thing in the world. Sansa considered the moonlight flickering upon Arya's cheek. When I close my eyes, I see halls burning, wolves howling, men screaming for their lost kings. If I misscribe a single clause, they may yet scream again. Kings scream too, Arya replied, voice flat. And so do queens. You're neither. A chancellor can choose when to sleep. Sansa laughed softly. Perhaps the first true laugh in days. Mother would have liked that. Arya's lips curved, faint as a fading shadow. Mother would have liked you better than any queen. She never liked them much. 3 days later, a wind rose from the east, rattling half-frozen banners along the parapets and carrying with it dire tidings. Scouts sighted banners of the Dreadfort riding south of Last River. Crimson-flayed man rippling like fresh blood upon snow. Lord Clay Serwyn brought the news, cloak still crusted with ice, voice hoarse from the ride. He found Sansa in the study, a dozen scribes hunched around her. They ride under a red flag, my chancellor, but the riders bear black armbands, as though in mourning. We count perhaps 60 spears. Sansa felt a cold bud within her chest. Bolton men, or mere sellswords. Who else would fly those colors? Some would rather fly a dragon. Samwell muttered, then paled under her gaze. Forgive me, Chancellor. You meant rightly, she said. Send ravens to Lord Glover and Lady Alice. The Bolton name may be gone, but there are still those who think the flaying knife will win back what was lost. She turned to Davos beside her. Can we spare riders to intercept? Black Allen leads 60 of the old watch riders near the Shivering Wood, Davos said. They could shadow the Bolton host, keep us abreast. But if fighting breaks, it must not. Sansa fingered the edge of the charter draft. The ink was not yet dry. The Republic could not bleed so soon. An envoy first. Someone who knows the cost of skins and shrieks. And Paye. A gruff voice rasped from the door. Lyanna Mormont, elder cousin of young Mage, stood with hands on hips, a broad-bladed spear across her back. The Boltons hunted my sister's kin. Let them tell me their grief. Sansa hesitated. Lyanna's courage was beyond doubt, but diplomacy required iron tempered with velvet. Then again, perhaps velvet would only provoke men who worshipped knives. She nodded once. You will ride with Davos. Speak our terms. No blood for land, no fealty but to the people. Lyanna accepted without flinch, though Davos' brow rose. As you command, Chancellor. Night stretched long and uneasy after they rode. Sansa walked the ramparts until dawn, snow swirling around her boots. She thought of parchment promises, and the old ways that clung to souls like burrs. Republic, she reminded herself. The word still felt foreign upon the tongue, like Braavosi or Volantini, exotic, fragile, easily broken. In the great hall, Samwell Tarly labored beneath smoky chandeliers, cataloging arrivals for the charter moot. He greeted her bleary-eyed. "More pledges," he whispered, showing her sealed scrolls. "Bear Island consents to common levy, and Deepwood Motte grants timber for the Northern Fleet. If fleet it can be called. I've counted 9 seaworthy hulls." "That is 9 more than yesterday," she said. Sam allowed himself a small smile. "I never imagined I'd copy laws for a free North. My brothers at the Citadel would choke on their chains." "Let them," Sansa murmured. She placed a hand upon his shoulder. "Rest while you can, Sam. Dawn creeps quickly when quills scratch late." He looked as though he wished to protest, but finally gathered his notes and shuffled away, rubbing his eyes. Alone, Sansa scanned the hall. Stone columns rose like trunks in a silent forest. Flickers of torchlight played upon carved faces worn smooth by centuries of smoke. The hush felt deeper than any god's would. For one heartbeat she fancied she heard the thump of her own girlhood footsteps echo between those pillars, chasing Arya or trailing Robb, giggling over tales of gallant knights and southern spires. How strange that she, who once sought a crown of roses, now wove a crown of laws. Footsteps again. Soft, measured. Maester Walken emerged from behind a tapestry, scroll in hand. "Pardon, Chancellor. Raven from King's Landing." "Dax." She straightened, pulse quickening. "Red." The Maester adjusted his lenses. "It is short. 2S Stark, styling herself Chancellor of the Northern Commons. Crown has received your charter, presently under review of small council. Good king makes no war upon peaceable subjects. Trade compact may be negotiated under banners at Moat Cailin come spring. In trust Sir Bronn of the Blackwater, hand of the king." Sansa exhaled. No denunciation. No promise of blades. Yet no recognition either. Diplomacy wrapped in a sellsword's glove. She could live with that. Have copies distributed to the council. And post a notice in the square at dawn. Let the small folk know the South will not march for now. Walken bowed and shuffled off. By the time Davos and Lyanna returned, 5 days had passed beneath uneasy skies. Word spread ahead of them. No battle, no flayed banners. The Bolton men had scattered, claiming no lord and marching only for food. Many now served at Moat Cailin under Glover's ward. Others trudged homeward, sullen but unbloodied. Lyanna strode into the courtyard furious nonetheless. "Cowards," she growled at Sansa's questioning look. "Like dogs yapping at wolves. They'd have sold their own for a stale loaf cart. You returned without spear through your belly," Sansa said gently. "Take that for victory." Lyanna's anger melted into a lopsided grin. "Eh, Chancellor?" "Perhaps," Davos reported more soberly. The men followed a hedge knight called Rogan Flint, distant cousin to the Fists, disgraced. He promised them plunder if the Republic failed. Once we read them your charter, half drifted off. Some even asked where to sign allegiance. Fear is a brittle banner. Sansa nodded. With every new parchment, with every man who laid down arms instead of raising them, the Republic gained sinew. Yet each success added weight to her shoulders. One spark could still ignite kindling half doused. Winter deepened. Ice choked the moat beneath Winterfell, and the glass gardens slept under crystal husks. Still the scribes wrote, the forges hammered, the ravens flew. Elections loomed like a slow tide. Each village to tally voices by colored stones. Each holdfast to send elected speakers to Wintertown. There they would choose among themselves 40 deputies to serve the Chamber of Commons until Thaw.g. No lord might sway the tally upon penalty of forfeiture of lands. A clause Sam insisted upon and Sansa endorsed. First to vote were the ore miners of Castle Serwyn. Their calloused hands closing around smooth river pebbles, dyed black for retention of old order, white for charter. When the cloak of night settled, the tally showed 11 black stones, 76 white. A roar went up, and Sansa, reading the Raven, felt tears burn at her eyelids. She kept none. Village by village, pebbles and beans, and carved chips rose upon scales. At the timber camps of the Wolf's Wood, 41 white, 9 black. At the fishing hamlet upon Lonely Light, 12 white, 3 black, 1 undecided stone, cast into the surf for the sea to choose. In Barrowton, the numbers ran close. Stiff-necked descendants of first men remember tomb kings with fierce pride, yet still white overcame by a breadth. Even deep Woodmont, stubborn as oak, surrendered dark stone to pale. When the final raven came from Skagos, delivered by trembling rook more feather than fat, and its tally, 12 white, 0 black, reached her hands, Sansa allowed herself, for the first time, a private gasp of triumph. Not one northern hold had rejected the charter. Some, like the Rills, wavered. Some, like the Dreadfort's broken men, kept away entirely. But none had chosen stark refusal. Still, the work had scarcely begun. The Chamber of Commons convened on the last day of the year, a torrent of humanity pouring into Wintertown. Fishermen smelling of salt wind, shepherds in wool cloaks, maesters in training clutching slates, smiths, tanners, midwives, a wildling matriarch named Crowtooth, who brought 20 votes from the gift. They crowded into makeshift inns and blanketed the market square with tents, their chatter a restless hum beneath Winterfell's walls. Sansa watched from a parapet, marveling. A feast day of governance. The chamber met in the old training yard, benches arranged in concentric rings around a raised dais where a single bell hung, forged from discarded swords of the long war against the dead. Samwell struck it at midday, the note resonant and deep, and 300 voices fell still. Sansa spoke first, not to command, but to welcome. She told them of the dream born beneath foreign banners and blood-slick ashes, of a north where no child would kneel for birthright, but would stand for choice. She spoke of Maester Luwin's tales of the old Republic of Valyria. Short-lived, tragic, yet brimming with possibility, and of the free cities compacts forged by trade. She spoke of her father, who died for honor, and of her mother, who fought for her children, and of her brother, the young wolf who crowned himself king only to lose his head. "We have worn crowns," she told them, voice catching. "We have buried them, heavy with ghosts. Let us instead weave a mantle of common cause, light enough for all shoulders." When she finished, the yard rang with silence so complete, it seemed every heart held a single breath. Then a roar rose. Not lordly applause with gloved hands, but the clamor of iron mugs upon benches, feet stamping earth, voices bellowing as though to rouse the very stones. Sansa stepped back, eyes wet. She found Arya in the crowd, leaning against a pillar, arms folded, a small fierce smile ghosting her lips. The sessions that followed were tumultuous, at times chaotic. Deputies argued over levy quotas, toll rights upon the King's Road, rotating magistracies, and whether free folk beyond the wall should count in tallies. Sansa presided from the dais, gaveling down outbursts, coaxing compromise. She listened far more than she spoke, for every voice was stone upon the foundation. Yet when debates threatened to unravel, her words anchored them. On the 7th day, a furious exchange over river tolls threatened blades. A tanner from Torrhen Square accused a waterman of bribery. The waterman retorted with slurs about sheep stink and cowardice. Sansa rose, cloak swirling, and recounted the night the dead broke the gates of Winterfell, when men of river and hill and forest fought shoulder to shoulder. "We stood as one then," she said, voice quivering with remembered terror. "Stand as one now, or your children will curse you for squandering peace." The yard fell still. The quarrelers sat. Minutes later, a compromise passed by acclaim. Beyond Winterfell, the world watched, mouths half open. In the Riverlands, Lord Edmure sent envoys to observe polling. In the Vale, young Lord Robin, guided by Sir Royce, debated elective councils. Even the Iron Islands muttered of Kingsmoot's renewed. But the South remained wary. Ravens arrived from King's Landing bearing perfumed parchment and cleverly vague inquiries. Queen Baratheon, Gendry's Dornish bride, sought friendship, but her spymaster Qyburn revived rumor of hidden dragons in the north, of sorcerers among weirwood roots. Sansa read each message, measured response like thread, and filed them away. Let the South wonder. Winter would keep roads impassable until thaw. By then, perhaps the charter would be strong enough to weather storms of gold and silk. Deep in January, with moonlight a sharp blade upon the snow, Sansa stole another hour in the Godswood. She found Jon there, cloaked in black as the memory of the wall he once served. He had arrived unannounced that evening, riding alone from the haunted forest where he now kept watch over wandering free folk and restless shadows. He did not bow. Starks seldom bowed to one another, but dipped his head, dark curls dusted white. I heard whispers of a new realm. Sansa managed a weary smile. You heard true. I would have sent word. But ravens rarely find exiles. He smiled back, thin and sad. Exiles grow used to silence. He eyed the heart tree. Father would have liked this. Republic. He would have trusted it, she said softly, because he would have trusted our people. Jon's eyes glinted. And you? Do you trust them? I trust what we make together more than what is thrust upon us. Crowns can be stolen. Consent must be given. Jon considered that, breath clouding in the frigid air. The South will test you. They already do. She told him of Bronn's letters, of Qyburn's rumors, of wary merchant treaties. But as long as the North holds fast, I can weather whispers. Jon's gaze drifted toward the walls beyond which the commons slept. Hold fast then. And if whispers become swords, he loosened the buckle on his cloak, revealing Longclaw's hilt. I am still my father's son. She placed a gloved hand upon his arm. I would ask you stay. Help shape what we build. I belong to the ghosts beyond the wall, he said, voice hoarse with distance. Distance of more than roads. But I will linger until moon turn. Ghost hunts with the pack beyond the Godswood. He'll watch your walls. Then Sansa swallowed hard. Ghost. True ghost. Or the dire wolf. She did not ask. Either would comfort her. The moon turned, elections adjourned, and the Chamber of Commons seated its first speaker. A plain-spoken smith from White Harbor named Brenna Tallhart. She accepted the polished oak mallet from Samwell with trembling hands, then pounded it once, the clap echoing like thunder through the hall. Thus dawned the first sitting of a Northern Assembly, chosen not by blood, but by voices of the frost-bound commons. Sansa stood aside, content to watch law awaken. She was chancellor, but the chamber breathed by itself now. Motions rose and fell like a tide. A levy for repairing the King's Road. A grant for a school in Wintertown. A debate on wildling representation that ended in provisional seats for 3 clan mothers. Each vote felt to Sansa like a heartbeat of some newborn creature, frail yet stubbornly alive. When the session closed for the night, Brenna crossed the dais to her. Chancellor Stark, she said, rough fingers gripping Sansa's forearm. I forged horseshoes all my life. Never thought I could shape law. You gave us the hammer. Sansa shook her head gently. I only opened the forge. Yet not all hammers rang in unison. Rumors seeped from the frost fangs of raiders bearing the kraken of pike. The Night's Watch, leaderless since Ed's death, turned petitioners at Winterfell's gate seeking supplies. And from the shadowed corners of Wintertown came whispers of a secret brotherhood. Sons of old houses who still prayed to lords, not law. One crisp morning, Sansa summoned her council. Samwell Brienne, Davos, Arya, Jon, and Brenna. They gathered in the small council chamber, no longer the Lord's solar, but a low-ceilinged room once used for needlework, ironically. Our republic stands, she began. But winter is long. The South eyes us warily. Pirates raid the coasts. Free folk wander restless. We need order without tyranny. Strength without crowns. She laid forth a proposal. A ranger corps drawn from sworn volunteers. Commanded not by noble birth, but by merit, tasked with guarding borders and roads. Davos would recruit seasoned sailors to patrol shorelines. Lyanna Mormont offered Bear Island longships. Jon, at her request, would train detachments in the tactics of the Watch, forging discipline out of wilderness skills. Brenna pledged the chamber's purse, modest yet growing from trade duties, to outfit them. Sam spoke of coin and grain. Arya, of infiltration and the unseen wars of rumor. Brienne promised to drill levees in Shield Wall. Together, they shaped a force small yet nimble, sworn not to chancellor or chamber, but to the covenant itself. Days bled into weeks. Sansa found herself amidst a whirl of parchment, hoofbeats, and distant flaring beacons. Yet even as problems multiplied, the Republic's rhythm steadied. Deputies returned to their towns carrying edicts inked with the new seal. A direwolf leaping over a knot of sheaves, ringed by runic script meaning, with one voice. Carpenters erected public boards, displaying statutes. Traders bartered iron ore for grain with tokens minted in White Harbor, bearing the same device. Children played at elections in village squares, crafting acorn ballots in snow. Ellen Karstark, lean and bookish, wrote to Sansa from Carhold. I scarcely believed my tenants would care to vote, but they queued before first light to drop pebbles in jars. Some wept when their voices were counted. Sansa read the letter thrice, hands trembling, until ink bled with tears she would not name. In early March, with thaw whispers upon the wind, the first challenge of cold steel came. Raiders from the Sea of Claws, long ships bearing gray sails, and the Black Kraken, slipped through ice floes to strike lonely fishing villages along the stony shore. Fires painted the sky amber. Smoke carried the stink of charred nets and despair. Sansa received raven after raven. Pleas, curses, tally of dead. She called the Ranger Corps to arms. Jon rode with them, ghost loping at his flank, snow spraying under great paws. They crossed the Wolf's Wood in 3 days, moving swift and silent. Beside Jon rode Mara Crowtooth, the wildling matriarch, her spear festooned with raven feathers. Behind came men and women of every house and none. Tallheart and then, Mormont and Moss, Smith's sons, Potter's daughters, banners woven with the leaping wolf. They reached the smoldering remnants of Pebble Cove by dusk. Scorched hulls upon shingle, gulls circling shrieking skies, survivors huddled amid splintered docks. Jon dismounted amid the devastation, studied the footprints in wet sand, the drag marks towards sea. They took captives. Mara knelt, scooping ash. Ironborn always do. At dawn they pursued, longships borrowed from Bear Island slicing through frigid swells. Sansa waited in Winterfell, each hour an eternity, until a raven arrived 5 days later. The Ironborn reavers lay broken upon rocks after a storm. Survivors taken captive by Jon's boarding party. Not one northern hostage slain. Blood spilled. Some northern, some Kraken, yet the Ranger Corps had held fast. The Chamber of Commons thundered acclaim. The villages along the stony shore rang bells. Yet Sansa's gratitude mingled with dread. Blood answered with blood, and the Iron Islands would notice. War, though distant, flickered on the horizon like summer lightning. Spring crept across the land, timid and shy. Snow retreated to shadowed hollows. Crocus thrust brave purple buds through thawing earth. In Winterfell's Godswood the heart tree bled fresh sap, crimson streaks upon white bark like new wounds. Sansa stood beneath it on the first morning frost-free, cloak unfastened, letting the chill breeze touch bare throat. She remembered Septa Morandane's lessons, of kings who ruled by sword, queens by whisper, of Rhoynar princes and Andal conquerors, and thought how little the old tale spoke of people who ruled themselves. A rustle behind. Arya appeared, wolfish grin splitting her face. Bronn arrives tomorrow with 100 men and half a king's court. They say he brings gold, parchment, and 2 jesters. Sansa arched one brow. 2 jesters. King Gendry wants to show goodwill. Arya shrugged. Nothing says peace like fools tumbling for coin. Sansa snorted. Perhaps we will tumble back. Jon sails at dawn for the wall, Arya continued, voice softening. He left you this. She handed over a small leather pouch. Inside lay a slender ring of polished weirwood set with a shard of dragonglass. Sansa traced its curve, heart aching. Wolves watch wolves, Arya said. I'll see you when the snows fall again. Bronn's arrival proved both spectacle and farce. He rode at the head of a column bright with Lannister crimson and Baratheon gold. a curious mixture that set northern brows arching. Banners of crowned stag and lion flapped beside his new sigil, a heap of gold on black. He dismounted before the gates with sardonic flourish, surveying Winterfell's towers as though appraising a brothel. "Nice castle," he drawled to no one in particular. "Could use a wine cellar." Sansa greeted him, flanked by Brienne and Speaker. "Brenna, Sir Bronn, welcome to the Northern Republic." Ben Fedalwen. He sketched a bow, mouth quirking. "Chancellor, pleasure's mine. King Gendry sends regards and peace." He produced a parchment sealed with black wax-stamped staggon wheel, and a heavy chest borne by 2 squires. "And a gift. Gold dragons sound the same no matter whose face is on 'em. King hopes they'll help repair your roads, so our carts may roll cheaper, mind." Sansa accepted with measured smile. "We thank the king for his generosity. The chamber will allocate funds as it sees fit." Bronn's gaze flicked to Brenna, noticing her rough hands. "This the chamber?" "One voice of it." Brenna's grin showed missing molar. "Careful, our votes swing heavier than swords." Bronn laughed. I've seen votes gut armies." He sobered. "I come also with concerns." His glanced at the walls. "Word is you're building fleets, drilling rangers, patrolling the neck." "Defending our people," Sansa answered. "And maybe looking south with hungry eyes?" he teased. "Our eyes are north," she said, voice edged with frost. "On sea and wall. The south will keep its throne. We keep our commons." Bronn raised hands. "I'll report it so. Got no love for war, costs gold." He gestured to his jesters, a tall Bravosi and a dwarf in motley. "They'll perform tonight, if you permit." Laughter oils treaties. Sansa inclined her head. "The people will enjoy a jape before spring's labor." That night, the great hall thrummed with mingled mirth and caution. Bronn lounged at high table beside Sansa, regaling lords with tales of Sellsword fortunes. His jesters tumbled and spouted riddles. Wine flowed. Northern mead, southern arbor red, and for a few hours fear loosened its grip. Near midnight, as torches guttered low, Bronn leaned close. "Word is, Chancellor, the Ironborn gather sails. They don't like losing their reavers." "Nor do we like losing our villages," she replied. "I could mediate," he said, eyes glittering with bargain. "For a price." Sansa smiled thinly. "The Republic pays its own debts." "But we thank the hand for concern." Bronn grunted. "Offer stands." By dawn he departed, leaving gold chests and a trail of ribald jokes. The Chamber of Commons convened, debating use of the gift. Some urged fortifying coasts, others repairing the king's road to cement trade. Brenna proposed splitting the dragons, half for ranger outposts, half for grain stores in anticipation of lean years. Debate raged, but by sunset a compromise emerged. A balanced ledger recorded by Samwell's ink-stained quill. Sansa watched with quiet pride. Once, gold crowns bought silence or swords. Now, it bought discourse. Yet news of Ironborn sales lent urgency. The Ranger Corps expanded, training intensifying under Joan's chosen captains. Lyanna Mormont led Coastal Watch, her voice a whip cracking over recruits. Free folk and hill clans drilled side by side under bare banners, forging unity on the anvil of necessity. Letters came from King's Landing, terse, curious, sometimes barbed. Qyburn queried wildling votes. Gendry's master of ships asked for timber. The High Septon worried over pagan hearts. Sansa answered each, measured and firm, parchment shields against meddling. She courted trade envoys from Bravos, selling timber for coin to fund rangers, and invited maesters to study the growing seed vaults, an idea borrowed from Old Town's ancient scrolls. In quiet hours, she walked Winterfell's corridors recalling ghosts. Ned's calm gaze at dawn, Catelyn's fierce embrace, Robb's laughter echoing across training yard. She whispered promises to them that she would not squander the North again. She would build something that endured. Arya sometimes joined her, footfalls soft upon stone. They spoke little, yet the silence was comforting. One eve, under a flickering sconce, Arya said, "Do you remember the stories old Nan told? The Night of the Laughing Tree?" Sansa nodded. A mystery knight who took no title. Father used to smile when she told it. Arya's eyes glimmered. Maybe the North is the Laughing Tree now, wearing no crown yet strong. Sansa smiled. Let's hope we laugh loud enough. Spring burst at last, sudden as a lanced boil. Snowmelt flooded rivers, sending driftwood hurtling beneath stone bridges. Fields awoke, brown turning to tender green. The chamber passed its first tax, modest copper farthings upon southern merchants entering the neck to fund granaries. Some muttered, but most agreed. Hunger had long memories. With meltwater came travel. Envoys from River Run arrived bearing trout banners, praising the Republic's courage. A red priestess from Volantis sought audience, speaking of a dawn yet to come. Sansa received them in the rebuilt solar, hearth-fired gentle. She weighed alliance and creed with care, ever mindful that new faiths could divide as quick as swords. Rumor of Northern Republic reached the free cities. A syndicate in Pentos offered ships at cut rates, hoping to secure rights at White Harbor. Sansa tasked Speaker Brenna and Lord Manderley to negotiate. Coin flowed west for Oak. Hulls would sail east. Yet, storms brew even as markets flourished. Scouts reported Kraken banners off Bear Island. 10 longships, perhaps more. The Ironborn tested shores, slipping ashore at night, plundering nets. Lyanna Mormont sent ravens inked with seawater. We need ships. We need fast oarcraft. The Kraken fastens claws. Sansa convened council beneath a rain-lashed roof. We must end these raids, she said. Not retaliate, defend. She proposed a fleet shared by houses, commanded by captains, elected by crews. Davos supported the idea, citing Braavosi sea charters. Lord Glover balked. Ships were dear. Brenna discovered funds by diverting coin from a new royal road, now common road, delaying its paving 2 years. They voted, and the measure passed by slim margin. Work began at once in White Harbor's yards. Hulls skeletoned under Saulane's pitch fires smoking. Northern carpenters sang old reeving songs as they built craft, not to raid, but to guard. The second summer dawned unusually warm, wheat rippling in golden waves. The Chamber of Commons stood for re-election. Ballots multiplied, colored cord segments in Tallhart's Ford, carved runes in the Sheepshead Hills. The process, once awkward, now felt ritual. Children learned to tally before they learned to ride. Opposition stirred, an alliance of old lords who felt diminished, calling themselves the Brotherhood of the Blood. They campaigned for seats, arguing that war demanded firm, ancient hands. They won some villages, especially among aged veterans who remembered Stark kings fondly. But they failed to command majority. The Republic, tested by raids and frost, still held faith. Brenna was returned speaker, her majority trimmed yet solid. Sansa's role, as chancellor, was ratified by acclamation of deputies. A formal election for chancellorship was scheduled for next year. Once a process was codified, she welcomed it. Authority must rest upon choice, not momentum. In the margin of a charter draft, Samwell scribbled, "Power rose like sunrise. Now let it set and rise anew." Sansa treasured the line, copying it into her private journal. The Ironborn threat crescendoed that autumn. 50 longships under Captain Harlan Blackwave descended upon the stony shore, burning hamlets too small to name. But the Northern Fleet, 5 stout merchanters refitted with scorpions and manned by mixed crews, met them off Pebble Point. Davos commanded from deck of the Wolf's Grace. Lyanna Mormont, armor glinting, stood beside him. They engaged at dawn beneath standard of Leaping Wolf. Eyewitnesses spoke later of arrows hissing like winter sleet, of grapnels biting hulls, of Mormont's spear impaling a Kraken raider clean through. The battle raged 6 hours, ending when tide turned and Ironborn hulls ran aground upon hidden shoals. 12 were sunk, 6 captured. Blackwave fled with ragged survivors. News reached Winterfell at sunset 2 days later. Bells throbbed across ramparts, Smiths hammered anvils in joyous clamor. Sansa welcomed wounded sailors into the great hall, saw their scars, heard their rough songs. They fought for coinless ideals, for hearths they would never see. She felt pride swell until it brimmed tears. Yet she also felt the turning of wheels unseen. The Ironborn would not forget humiliation. The South would watch this new strength warily. And within the North, hidden lords plotted. One mist-laden dawn, Davos returned bearing captured Ironborn. Among them, a gaunt warrior with eyes black as midnight oil knelt before Sansa in the courtyard. "I yield to the Wolf Republic," he growled. "Spare my crew, and I will parley." Sansa studied him. Salt-stiff braids, shark-tooth charms, wrists bound. A hush crept across assembled watchers. She signaled Davos to remove the man's gag. "Speak." "I am Garros Salt, bastard of Blacktide. The Kraken gathers under a new banner. Vicon Greyjoy, son of Victarion the Red Priest, he vows a war of salt and iron until North kneels or drowns." Gasps fluttered. Sansa's pulse drummed. "Will he parley?" Garros spat blood. "He parleys with drowning, lady." "Pardon, Chancellor." She inclined head. "Then we will meet him at sea." That night she convened council. Davos urged preemptive course. Sail to Pike. Strike before Kraken fleets grew. Brienne counseled caution. Northern hulls too few. Arya suggested shadow war. Cutthroats of captains. Sow fear. Sam proposed distant alliances. Hire Braavosi to harry Iron Islands. Debate raged past midnight. Sansa listened, weighing every claim against stores of grain, against hearts of small folk, against dream of republic unbloodied. At cockcrow she spoke. "We prepared defenses. We call for aid from Riverlands. Edmure owes debt to Winterfell. And we send envoys to Pike under banner of the Commons. But we do not strike first." She looked at each face. "The Republic's strength is its cause. We hold fast, we defend, we endure." Jon, newly returned from the wall, nodded silent assent. Through the short, bright days of late autumn preparations hummed. White Harbor spilled tar-scented smoke as more hulls rose. Rangers rotated along coasts, horns ready. Cregan marshals drilled archers upon cliffs. The chamber passed emergency levy to fund arrow fletchers and beacon towers. In Wintertown, children gathered driftwood to carve little wolves they sold to passing merchants whose tongues spoke of northern resolve. The envoy to Pike, Sir Roderick Riswell and Maester Wolken, sailed aboard the Grey Lady. They carried a charter copy and tokens of peace. Barrels of northern ale, weirwood-carved icons of the Seven and Old Gods both. None expected swift accord. Yet sending word of peace felt essential. Even Krakens might read parchment. Sansa watched their sails vanish into dawn, heart tight. She caught Arya watching her. "If they don't return," Arya said, fingers resting on needle's hilt, "I'll fetch them." Sansa's lips curved. "I hope that won't be necessary. But I trust you, sister." Winter's edge returned. Frost-crusting river reeds. Ravens arrived from Moat Cailin. Southern merchants brought rumors. King's Landing weighed alliances. Gold cloaks patrolled borders. The Reach offered grain if North opened trade southward. Diplomats smelled opportunity. Sansa juggled missives, council sessions, heartfelt pleas from villages begging for seed grain, letters from mages wanting to study dragonglass deposits near the finger. She seldom slept more than 4 hours. When exhaustion threatened collapse, she walked among common tents, listening to chatter, reminding herself why parchment and patience mattered. In one such stroll, she overheard a potter recount the elections. "We were meant to break our backs for some lord, but now we count stones." "I never thought my voice would weigh." His companion replied, "It weighs because wolves guard it." Sansa drifted on. Heart warmed. The envoy never reached Pike. Storm shattered Grey Lady against reefs near Harlaw. Survivors floated for days on debris until fishermen found them. Roderick perished. Wolken survived, frostbitten. He brought tidings. Ironborn sails thick as ravens around Pike. Rumors of a new high priest blessing every oar for war. Salt wives chanted songs, of drowned gods' wrath upon wolves. Council met in tense silence. Davos' knuckles whitened. We've weeks, maybe less. Before they strike, if they gather 100 ships, our 10 will crumble. Brenna stared at tabletop. We could levy emergency tithe for shipwrights, gather pine from Wolfswood, hemp from Tallhart's fields. Sam added, Bravos might lend galleys, if we pledge port rights and tariff cuts. Arya noted softly. Assassins cheaper than ships. Sansa raised hand. We will do all at once. Levy timber, hire foreign galleys, and send shadows to sow discord among Greyjoy banners. We protect lives above pride. Her gaze swept room. But we will not break this republic upon Kraken rocks. If the Ironborn come, they will find not lords squabbling, but people united. Snow began anew, thick and heavy. Black gulls cried over White Harbor as hulls launched. Bravosi galleys approached horizon, triangular sails in wind. Beacons lit along entire coastline, flames stabbing night. Sansa stood upon Winterfell's highest tower as winds howled, cloak whipping. She watched red flares blink across far hills, felt the cold bite her cheeks. Yet inside her blazed a fiercer warmth. Pride in her people, faith in their choice. The North had cast aside crown, yet not courage. A raven flapped to perch upon parapet, scroll bound to leg. Her fingers trembled opening it. Inside, only 4 words in hasty script. Kraken sail at dawn. She looked northward, where sea met sky and ink-dark merge. Somewhere beyond that line, iron keels cut waves toward them. Sansa Stark breathed deep, tasting snow and iron and distant salt. She closed her eyes, feeling old ghosts gather. The quiet strength of her father, the fierce will of her mother, the laughter of Robb, the loyalty of Jon, the silent watch of Arya. Then she opened them and faced the coming storm, heart unafraid. For the North was no longer a kingdom of crowns, but a republic of hearts, and hearts, she knew, beat loudest when they beat together. Gah, Dejamor. Snow whispered along the battlements through the small hours, brushing stone with a hush, so thin it seemed made of breath alone. Sansa remained on the east rampart, long after the watch changed, fingers buried in the fleece lining of her gloves, gaze fixed upon the horizon, where black met deeper black. Torches guttered in their iron sconces, orange beads trembling in the teeth-sharp wind. Somewhere down in the training yard a lonely hammer rang, one final rivet driven into a helm that would greet the dawn, and the note skittered across the frost like a pebble on ice. She listened for other sounds. The rasp of whetstones in the armory vaults, the creak of sledges bearing fresh quarrels from castle stores, the distant murmur of 600 hearts refusing sleep in Wintertown below. Tonight, every sound felt magnified, threads of a single loom knotting into some vast tapestry, whose pattern she could sense, but not yet see. Brienne found her just before the moon dip. She came without helm or even cloak, trusting the hard chill to bite color into her cheeks. The 8th watch reports the beacon still clear, she said quietly. No sails in sight. They'll come, Sansa answered, tone calm, almost gentle. Tarl the harbor master counted them passing Skagos on the evening tide. Even battered hulls keep a schedule. She folded her arms across the rough-spun cloak stitched by the Wintertown guildswoman. Gray and white, dyed with the same pigment they once reserved for wedding linens. So many traditions repurposed these days. She had begun to lose count. Brienne glanced at the southern sky. A few hours yet, then. I tried to keep the council within their beds, but Davos never learned the trick of sleeping on the eve of battle. He paces the glass gardens. Sansa managed a faint curve of her mouth. Talking to the vines. Ser Davos talking to plants. A low chuckle. I hope they give good counsel. They do. They listen. Sansa let the quiet stretch. Have you seen Arya? Not since dusk. She took a satchel and vanished toward the stables. Sansa nodded. Then she's already where she needs to be. Below, a gust tore a pennant loose from the citadel spire. It spun eastward, a strip of cloth slipping into the night. Sansa tracked it until it disappeared. Come inside just for a cup of broth, Brienne urged. A warm stomach helps a cold mind think. In a moment, she laid a gloved palm on the ice-rough Merlon. "Do you remember the first snowfall after we reclaimed Winterfell? We built a cairn for Rickon out here because the crypts were flooded." "I remember." Brienne bowed her head. "The snow rats kept digging at the stones. They still do. I never set foot on this wall without hearing him laugh." She inhaled, felt the cold sting her lungs. He would have liked the Republic. It was always rules he minded, not chores. Give Rickon a reason, and he obeyed. Deny him one, and he would throw onions at the cook. Silence pressed between them until Sansa straightened. "Tell Maester Walken to signal town crier at first pale. I want every hearth to know their chancellor stands the walls with them." "Banortumthos." Brienne saluted with closed fist to breastplate, then strode away, cloak snapping behind her. Alone again, Sansa closed her eyes, counting her heartbeats, forcing each to slow until her breath fogged steady. She listened to the snow, to the hammer's brief echo, and to the deep stillness beyond, the vast hush just before flint meets powder. When she opened her eyes, the far horizon had grown a shade lighter, a charcoal wash hinting at the blood-red smear soon to follow. Dawn or storm, she could not yet tell. "None." Vicon Greyjoy tasted salt on the wind and smiled. It was a cruel wind. Ice crusted his breath and tore at the throat, but to him it tasted of promise. He stood on the serpent-proud forecastle of the Iron Shrike, one gloved hand wrapped around the railing of cold black pine, the other steady on the leather cords of the war banner. 49 ships formed a ragged wedge behind him. Long ships and round, raiders refitted as rams, a pair of lumbering Myrish hulks purchased with stolen Reach wine. Above each prow snapped the black kraken on ragged gray. But along the hem of every flag he had sewn a strip of red dyed in the priest's own vats. "Blood for wolves," the priests had muttered, an augury well met. He preferred simpler words. Fear. A thin priest of the drowned god bent beside him, croaking scripture that barely carried above the waves. Vicon ignored him. Beyond the bowsprit, a smear of white glimmered where the sky brightened. It was land or ice haze, impossible to tell. But the depth of the water told him they were near the hidden reef the salt wives called Widow's Smile. A handspan farther east and the seafloor would rise. Go too far west, and the current would grind ironwood into splinters on unseen teeth. The channel between was 3 cables wide, a slit, but wide enough for a kraken's blade if helmed true. "Signal Blackwave," he ordered, voice low but razor sharp. But a drummer sent 3 booming strokes across the water. Far astern, a triangular lantern flared green in answer. The wedge flexed, narrowing into a spear point. Vicon felt the bow beneath his boots lift on a swell, then descend, gull-like, into the trough. "Tide with us," he murmured. "Wolves still sleep." Lightning flashed low on the southern bank of clouds. A dull silver flicker followed by distant mutter. He sniffed. Storm chasing them, or breaking ahead. Either one cut both ways. Winter storms bowed kraken masts as easily as northern ones. But storms also hid approach and muddied northern bows with foam so thick an arrow could scarcely find flesh. He raised his arm. Drums. Half beat. The thunder of hide stretched over oak rose and fell. 50 sets of oars dug in, half cadence, blades biting black water. The fleet advanced into the dim gray where horizon met rising light. Sansa descended spiral stairs into the rookery tower. Maester Walken hunched beside an iron brazier, warming ink bottles so the liquid would flow despite the freeze. Unhooded ravens shuffled on perches, croaking softly. A parchment lay on the bench nearest the maester. An open letter bearing the broken seal of Gulltown. She recognized its crab emblem. "Anything urgent?" Walken bowed. "Lord Grafton offers a loan of grain, but only if we guarantee repayment within 10 moons. He fears Ironborn might spill south into the Bight." "Maybe. We'll repay in 6, she said automatically. "The first new levy ships within the fortnight." The maester scribbled as she walked to the slit window. Pale gray pricked the east. Shapes emerged. Wintertown's rooftops, the distant twist of the King's Road snaking between fir groves, and upon the river plain the faint outlines of tents, recently erected for overflow militia. Changing shadows showed movement, men relieving themselves behind stakes, cooks stoking fires for porridge, a stray dog nosing embers. Ordinary dawn routines, yet every gesture vibrated with the knowledge that iron might fall from the sky before noon. A flutter of black wings startled her. A raven launched from its run and sailed past her shoulder into the chill, trailing a soft caw. Superstition whispered that ravens felt deaths before men did. She banished the thought. "Send the reply," she told Wolken. "Then ring the town bell. One toll only, steady readiness." She left before he answered. "Nah." In the glass gardens, Davos Seaworth spoke to tomato vines indeed, but only because no other counselor stood near at this pre-dawn hour. The glass roof above him rattled with pellets of frozen sleet, each pane echoing like hail on a ship's deck. He pressed a hand against the pane. A hairline fracture spidered under his palm. 10 days earlier, Queen Sansa, he still thought of her thus, habit stronger than decree, had joked that storms respected neither charters nor glass houses. He hoped to the 7 she was wrong about storms at least. Footsteps crunched outside. Then the door eased open. Jon Snow stepped in, shaking sleet from his black cloak. The patchy beard across his jaw had grown silver streaks since they first met, ghosts of snow rather than age. But his gray eyes remained unchanged, cool embers banked under frost. "Rangers assembled at the east gate," Jon said, voice low. 200 archers with spare quivers, 100 spear, 90 shield. Ghost scouts ahead beyond the pools. Davos nodded, tugging gloves tighter. "Any word from Lyanna's coastal pickets?" "Nothing since dusk. The beacons are cold. That can mean clear seas or dead lookouts." "Nem sign?" "Always the sunny outlook." Davos managed a thin smile. "We hold the home water line. They'll not land their whole body up the long beach if we light the pitch slick." Jon studied the rows of plants. Tiny yellow blossoms quivered beneath frost-clouded panes. "We used to grow wintergreens in pots on the wall. Sam named them all. He swore talking to them kept them alive. Hence my conversation." Davos tapped a wooden stake, bracing a vine. "Told them if they bore fruit I'd pour a cask of arbor red around their roots. Bribery." Jon exhaled a breath that almost became a laugh. "I hear the chamber debates whether to outlaw bribery or license it." "License, cheaper fines." Jon almost smiled. Then his gaze drifted eastwards through the fog glass. "When steel meets sea, we'll lose men whose voices never yet cast a single vote. Their mothers will ask why." Davos considered. "Because wolves learned to speak, and krakens didn't like the sound." He clapped Jon's shoulder. "Best we keep our own throats clear, eh?" A horn blast pealed, muffled through glass but deep enough to quiver every pane. Both men stilled. Second blast, longer data. Davos' pulse thumped. "Shore horn, North Road, 2 notes. Sails sighted." Jon opened the door and vanished into sleet without another word. Moandel. The eastern sky showed bruise colors, lavender, gunmetal, ash. When the Iron Shrike rounded Widow's smile, and Vicon caught first glimpse of coastal bluff. No beacons, no sails. Perfect. He raised his axe in salute to his drummer, who shouted cadence. Oars dipped faster. Foam-sheathed black prows. Then a spark bloomed on the ridge. Tiny, crimson, almost pretty. Another, yellow. Then a fountain of green fell from nowhere, blossoming in midair like hanging moss of flame. Beacons not on ridge but behind. Screened until flare launch. Signal fires. Vacon's smile thinned. "Full beat," he barked. "Archers to prow." Hefted shields locked along gunwales. Half an arrow's flight ahead the channel narrowed. Shoals on either side foamed white in half-light. He would need every foot of width. Something thudded starboard aft of Shrike. Then a second impact shook deck planks. Vicon pivoted. The Mirish hulk Copper Widow, third behind him, had lurched port. A gout of water spurted through a fist-wide hole just above waterline. Catapult shot? No. Too low, too fast. Trebuchet from cliff. He cursed. Wolves had built towers on rocks, hidden in night. Shields high. Oars kept time. Ships pressed on. Another flash, this time port bow. And a hiss like iron in water. A black-fletched shaft clanged off the mast 10 feet over Vicon's head. Skittering to deck. He stooped, plucked it. Head of dragon glass. Shaft of ash stained wolf gray. So, Stark children played at the game. Lower sail. Row steel. Shrike's mainsail furled, oarsmen braced. Fleet spread slightly as masts dipped. Then he saw them. Shapes moving among the dawn haze just beyond shoal line. Low, wide-beamed hulks, too fat for raiders, rowed by double banks. Braavosi galleys, hulls painted a dull ocean blue that melted into sea. And on their prow, wolf banners. Cut left, he snarled. We ran the lead half-moon, show them iron bites. The drummer pounded furious beat. Shrike surged, water hissed under keel. From the Braavosi flagship swept a shrill keening, pipes bending notes into a cry that set teeth on edge. Vicon felt his oarsman falter at that sound. He roared to drown it. Targets closed fast. The galley's bow angled, refusing collision, meeting Shrike not broadside but quarter on, sliding to sheer like a sharpened scythe. Vicon anticipated, leaned to starboard to prepare counter-turn. He never finished. A wave of fire washed from the enemy deck, jars of whale oil pitched by sling. The first exploded on Shrike's rail. The second shattered amidships, coating oars and leather armor in viscous flame. Screams tore air. Men rolled. Cloaks ignited. Vicon leapt down half-flight of steps, seized a bucket, but flame gutters danced on water, feeding on oil. He felt heat bake his cheek, smelled burnt hair. Douse with seawater, he roared, though he knew salt water fed certain oils. The Shrike lurched. Flames claimed sails. Rigging sagged like glowing sinew. Vicon tore a smoldering strand from his wrist, yelling for hand axes. A scorpion bolt from the Braavosi ship thudded into his mainmast with a splintering shriek. He turned aft, saw Copper Widow foundering, water at row slots. Beyond, 3 wolf galleys moved like sledhounds pacing each other. Oars dipping in unison, hulls low but stable. Behind them, a 4th vessel bore a banner familiar even to Ironborn. A bear rampant over Crescent Moon. Lyanna Mormont's flagship, the island's roar. Vicon clenched jaw. Storm above, fire ahead, and between the shoals. He spit into the waves. Well then, he murmured. Make a song of it. Shh. Jon Snow crouched behind the Merlin of the outer seawall tower, north of White Harbor. Spyglass pressed to his eye. Wind battered the tower, slinging salt spray over his hair, but his gaze stayed fixed on the distant melee. Tiny black shapes circled like beetles on a pond. Now and then, a bloom of orange blossomed, a ship aflame. He traced which banners burned. 2 kraken, 1 wolf, by his rough count. Clouds of gulls wheeled overhead, screeching. At his side, Mara Crowtooth knelt, eyes narrowed slits against wind-blown snow grains. That'll be Mormont on the blue strip bear. She'll ram next pass. A hint of admiration threaded her rasp. Jon lowered glass. Signal Tower 3 to launch second volley. A signalman turned the crank on a bronze horn. A low wail cascaded shoreward. Minutes ticked while Jon's gaze returned to battle. A shadow lifted above Wolf Ship number 2. A trebuchet lob, arcing heavy. Midway, the round shape burst, petals of flame unfurling. A pot of pitch lit mid-air. It struck an Ironborn raider over the prow. Fire fanned across deck. Oars crabbed, then stilled. Good shot. Mara grunted. Thunder rumbled overhead. Jon glanced up. Storm clouds massing. Tattered lavender illuminated by hidden lightning. Snow or sleet by nightfall. Then true winter storm. We've 2 hours until weather closes, he said. She nodded. Time enough to drown krakens. He wished confidence were shield against loss. At Winterfell, Sansa stepped into the great hall, now repurposed as command heart. Shearing morning light slanted through clerestory windows, catching motes swirling. Maps blanketed trestle tables. Her own charcoal annotations, marking ranger patrols and beacon lines. Samuel Tarley stood bent over a ledger, quill flying, murmuring casualty estimates delivered by Raven. Hull numbers, arrow expenditure, grain allotments for a week should roads cut. When she approached, he halted, ink-black smudge across his cheek. 2 wolf galleys lost, he blurted. 1 Bravosi crippled, but afloat. Scouts say Ironborn flagship aflame, but still driving toward shallow estuary. Davos requests tide gauge. Thinks reavers may beach under cliff shadow to regroup. Do we have shore stakes ready? Dug in last month at Davos' insistence. Iron-tipped. But only in the first inlet. They won't all fit. She pressed thumb against lip, thinking. Send order to Glover's Mason Company. Roll pitch barrels to cliff rim, rig with views. If Kraken's beach, drop fire. Sam scribbled. On it. Also, the chamber's small folk deputies wait outside. They ask to help. Help. Cooks want to boil fat for cauldrons. Children gather sling stones. They ask permission. Sansa's breath caught. Tell them the Republic consents. And thanks them. Sam half smiled despite the tension. They'll like that. Sansa turned, cloak swishing, and strode toward War Stair. Halfway up she paused, palm flat to masonry, steadying herself. The stone thrummed, distant catapults reverberating through the bones of Winterfell. She whispered a silent oath and resumed climbing. In the Naosi, Sir Bronn of the Blackwater lounged in a tower chamber reserved for honored guests, boots on a velvet footstool. He had remained in Winterfell rather than ride south with his retinue, citing an ankle twisted on icy steps. Now he studied the stonework as if calculating its resale value. A serving boy burst in without knocking. Sir, Chancellor asks every able man to aid defenses. Bronn raised a brow. She does she? Well, go on then. Am I able? He wiggled the bandaged ankle skeptically. Boy flushed. They said all arms, even if lame. Hells. Bronn rolled upright, testing weight. Pain flared but bearable. Fetch my sword, and a good scarf. Silk, not this Northman wool that scratches like lice. When the boy scurried off, Bronn limped to window. From this height he saw the pale line of coast. Flecks of flame dotted water like new stars. He whistled low. Stubborn little birds, these wolves. He rifled through a trunk, withdrew a purse heavy with King's Landing gold. For a moment he weighed it in his palm, then tossed it onto the bed. Gold meant little if Kraken tokens covered the north by nightfall. Better to toss dice with winners. Oh, Demon? The island's roar slammed into the flank of the iron shrike with a crunch that sent Lyanna Mormont to one knee though she gripped the railing. Splinters fountained. Ironborn archers loosed from dying shrike. 2 arrows thunked her shield. A third grazed her unhelmed scalp. She barely noticed. Board! She bellowed, voice startlingly deep for her modest frame. Ramps dropped. Bare island shields locked as a wedge. Spears thrust. Hooked the rail of shrike. Smoke poured over both decks where oil burned. Flames licked shrike's masttop, yet Ironborn still roared defiance, axes raised. Lyanna led the leap. Her boots landed on blackened planks, heat-scorched soles, but she drove forward. Spear butt smashing first Reaver's jaw. Bare Islanders surged behind. Ironborn met them in a clash of iron on flame-lit deck. Somewhere overhead rigging snapped. A boom crashed, trailing burning canvas. Above it all Lyanna heard monstrous roar, part human, part storm. Then glimpsed the captain, tall mail-clad giant, swinging twin-bladed axe, half-face streaked with soot. He cleaved an Islander's helm, then roared again. Lyanna ducked under his neck sweep, lunged. Her spear point skidded off plate. She rolled aside as axe buried in deck. Wood groaned. Shrike listed. Water gushed through seams. The ship was dying. But while it floated, fight raged. Neonorn. Jon Snow's tower horn sounded again. 3 notes, descending. Sansa paused on parapet as messenger sprinted upstair. Captain Snow reports Ironborn mass along South Shoal. Likely second wave seeking beach. She absorbed that. Tell him, hold ranged, await cliff pitch. Messenger bowed and bolted. She felt vibration beneath feet as trebuchet on outer wall released another payload. Somewhere a raven croaked above wind. Another runner arrived, panting harder. Chancellor, sabotage caught in East Granary. 2 men of Brotherhood. Sansa's head snapped. Alive? One alive. Arya Stark stopped them. Second torches secure. Fingers lessened grip on parapet. See wounded to Maester. Put prisoner in tower cell, but feed him bread. Better their miso. Bread. He sought to burn ours. Show what Republic means. He left. Sansa drew long breath of sea-sour wind. Footsteps behind. Brienne. Helm donned, visor up. Chamber cooks ready oil. The children have filled 12 wicker baskets with stones. Sansa managed to smile. Then the north will be fed and armed. Lightning flashed again, closer, followed by thunder that rattled teeth. Wind shifted, bringing scent of smoke and sea fire. Brienne peered east. Daylight enough now. You should see this with spyglass, she offered. Sansa lifted glass. At first, she found only roiling gray. Then shape swam into focus. Smoldering wreck listing, Kraken banner half burned. Bear Island ship lashed alongside, tiny figures swarming deck like ants on carcass. Beyond, a line of galleys rode at oblique angle, funneling Ironborn toward shallows, where darker smudges lined water. Stakes. Maybe. She lowered glass. They're shepherding wolves to pen. Brienne nodded. Davos plan. Channel them off deep water, trapped between shoals and archers. Sansa's heart hammered. If it holds, the sea itself will fight with us. Sea and storm, Brienne murmured, as first snowflakes drifted from thundercloud. No. On the crumbling deck of Iron Shrike, Vikon parried a spear thrust, twisted, slashed across chest of a Bear Island youth. Blood sprayed, steaming against deck heat. He stepped over corpse, seeking she-cub who led these whelps. There, small bear crest on round shield, brown braid plastered by sweat. She stabbed an Ironborn through thigh, reversed haft to strike temple. Fast. Dot. Too bold for child. He lunged. She saw, pivoted, shielded high. Axe bit wood rim. Stuck. She yanked spear butt, forcing him close, slammed shield boss into his jaw. Pain flashed white. He snarled, wrested axe free with savage jerk, shattered her shield. She skipped back, deck lurched. Flames surged. Warhorn sounded from Braavosi galley, low bull call. Vikon glanced starboard. Another wolf galley closing, rams ready. He spat blood. Shrike shuddered, timbers whining. The sea was winning. He barked a retreat call. 3 harsh grunts on signal horn, but half his men were dead or grappling. The she-cub heard horn, thrust again. Her spear found gap at his armpit, glanced, partly blocked by plate, yet dug flesh. He felt warmth spread. Rage boiled over, he hacked downward. Shaft splintered, spearhead clattered. She rolled, knife flashing, sliced across his bootlaces. He stumbled but kept feet. Thunder cracked overhead. Sudden sleet pelted deck. Flames hissed. Vikon raised axe two-hand. The girl's dagger looked tiny beneath stroke to come. Then, an arrow struck his shoulder from nowhere. Second arrow, dragon glass, pierced thigh. His knees buckled, axe clanged plank. He wheeled, saw a cloaked archer balanced on Shrike's mass stump. Ghost white direwolf emblem on quiver. Jon Snow. No. Snow fought shore. Another? The archer knocked again, too far for throw. Around him, Bear Island fighters surged. Vikon spat curse. He ripped arrow from thigh, hot pain searing, and bounded for rail. He hit water a heartbeat before new volley hissed through sleet. Icy brine swallowed him but doused flame from tattered cloak. He kicked upward, blood seeping in ribbons. Above, Shrike's hull listed like dying leviathan, bear flag already replacing Kraken high on yard. Vicons surfaced between floating oars, coughing seawater. Ships all around, some burning, some circling. A Bravosi hull loomed starboard. He ducked under. He must reach shallows. Gods, that spear tip had carved deep. Pooling strength, he swam. On cliff edge overlooking First Inlet, Davos knelt with fuse cord as northerner youths rolled barrels to lip. Snow streaked his beard white, sleet stung eyes. Below, 3 longships sought land between stakes, ignoring pikes from shore archers. Waves foamed around keels already scraping sand. "Ready," he barked. Boys lit pitch-soaked rag, flame guttered in wind. Davos leaned, measured surge, then shoved barrel over. It tumbled, hit rock outcrop, burst, thick black oil dribbling. Second barrel followed. Archers loosed fire arrows. 2 missed, sizzled out. Third arrow struck oil pool. Whoosh! A sheet of flame raced across surface, licking prow of first longship. Timbers crackled. Ironborn shrieked. More barrels reeled over. Inferno blossomed along tide line, fused with swirling sleet into choking steam. Davos felt searing heat on cheeks, though cliff stood 40 feet up. He risked glance seawards. Further out, northern galleys pivoted, herding strays toward burning inlet. Like sheepdogs with torches, pride welled. Thunder boomed, louder. He squinted as lightning ripped sky from cloud to sea, revealing silhouette of Kraken flagship beyond shoals. Immense, many-oared sails full. Not part of earlier fight. Reserve. Captain perhaps. It lurked outside torch range, waiting storm to cloak charge. Dragons below, he muttered. He hailed messenger. To Chancellor, new flagship lies beyond shoals. Could break line under storm cover. Need scorpion bolts ready at South Jetty. Nasta one, then Sevikiding. Runner fled. In Winterfell's cellars, Arya Stark wiped her blade clean, on cloth, torn from prisoner's cloak. The Brotherhood saboteur sat slumped against wall, wrists chained, eyes wide as if seeing phantoms. Arya studied him a moment, as one might a worm skewered on pin. "You tried to burn grain, meant for children," she said softly. "Why?" He swallowed, blood trickling from split lip. "Kings must rule. Not." He trailed off as her gaze sharpened. "We serve Trueborn." "Trueborn?" she echoed, glancing toward ceiling where distant thunder rumbled. "Those men dying at sea, some are bastards, some free folk, some small folk sons. They bleed the same red." She knelt, bringing her face level. "A grain of truth for a loaf of bread. Who leads you?" Silence. She flicked dagger tip, slicing thread of hair near his ear. His breath whistled. "We call him Flint," he whispered. "Rogan Flint. Dead 2 months in Wolfswood ambush." She rose. "Choose better ghosts." She turned to jailer. "Feed him. Let him taste the bread he would burn." Oh. The storm broke full at noon, a squall of icy rain slashing sideways, wind shrieking like rent sails. Visibility dropped to spear's length. Even castle fires looked blurred through shimmering sheets. Yet battle raged by feel more than sight. Jones Rangers, cloaks plastered to bodies, advanced along seawall, bows slung. He raised fist, column halted. Beyond mist, he could smell pitch smoke. Suddenly a hulking shape bulged through gray. An iron-borne boat, half sunk, smashed against stakes. 2 survivors scrambled across beam onto shingle. John signaled. 3 rangers flanked. He stepped forward. "Yield," he called. One Kraken man lunged with axe. An arrow took him in throat. Second dropped weapon, hands raised. John nodded to Mara. She bound him. They pushed on. Lightning flared, blue-white. For one heartbeat, entire shore illuminated. Burning ships, collapsed masts, black silhouettes waiting knee-deep in surf to drag wounded. John saw bare banners still flying on highest remaining mast, saw Bravosi hull towing crippled Wolf galley toward deeper water. He also saw the immense reserve flagship sliding north behind shoal line, sails reefed, oars shipping slowly in heavy tide. Thunder swallowed light. Darkness returned. Jon grabbed horn. 3 blasts. Alert of new threat. Answering horns echoed across walls. Nando. Sansa paced command dais, wet cloak dripping onto rushes. Messengers darted around her like swallows. She read reports even as quills penned new ones. Bolton remnant patrol securing crossroads. Karstark levy reinforcing inland beacon. Another scrap. Oil stores half spent. Another. Prisoner count 43. Then Bronn burst through hall doors, armor piecemeal but gleaming. Chancellor. Where most need blade. She blinked at him. Your ankle? Turns out fear men's bone. He twirled sword, grin crooked. Tell me where to stick krakens. South Jetty, she said without hesitation. Scorpions need a captain who can swear louder than wind. He saluted cheekily. Thought you'd never ask. Then, more quietly, I've coin on the wolves now. Don't make me regret. He strode out whistling. Sansa exhaled. She studied hall once more. Too many bodies moving in sharp motions, tension humming. She closed eyes. Father, I never asked to rule. Yet here, I stand on stones you bled into. She opened them, turned to Sam. Sound bell, 3 strokes. War Council, meet in Solar. We need next line of defense should flagship break harbor. Nanoshterbree. Sam ran to bell rope. She stepped off dais, boots squelching, mind already calculating fallback positions, evacuation of townsfolk, rationing of remaining pitch. The storm battered hull roof, but inside her chest new fire steadied. Each decision forged another link in Republic's chain, and she would not let that chain break so soon after its mintage. Yen? At South Jetty, Bronn clambered onto Scorpion platform just as a gust slammed wave over parapet. Crew huddled under soaked furs. He slapped near a soldier on back. Cheer up, lads. Nothing warms blood like skewering fish. Through wind-whipped spray, he saw shape of the Ironborn flagship closing. Massive, triple-tier ore banks chewing surf. It bore no sail now, storm would shred it. But mast carried effigy of drowned god, arms spread. Glow of deck torches flickered through sheets of rain. They aimed prow at harbor mouth. Bronn spat. Big ugly bastard, ain't she? He pivoted Scorpion. Sighted. Line up 1 foot, left of figurehead. Elevation 3. Crew obeyed. Wind gusted, shaking sinew rope. Bronn waited heartbeat. Loose, dark T. Bolt whistled, vanished into gray. Seconds later, a dull thump. Couldn't see impact. He grimaced. Relo dart. Flagship advanced, too steady. He watched for shore stakes. They reached only smaller craft lines. This beast would surf right over. Second bolt loosed. A spark. They'd struck torch, maybe. Ship kept coming. Crew murmured prayers. Bronn snarled. Aim for waterline, stempost joint. We punch hole, tide will do rest. Third shot. Rain blurred view, but he glimpsed crack and white spurt. Timber shard, maybe. Flagship yawed slightly, yet resumed. Again. A deep horn moaned from fortress. Jon's tower. Bronn glimpsed movement on bluff. Silhouettes tipping carts. Moments later, sheets of blue fire cascaded off cliff, but wind blew much backward, scattering harmless. Damn weather. Flagship now within catapult throw. He saw Ironborn preparing boarding hooks. Too close for Scorpion soon. Suddenly, a slender Bravosi galley shot from mist. Sail shredded, but oars churning. It crossed flagship's bow, trailing rope with anchor of iron spikes. Anchor bit prow sculptures, tethering like harpoon and whale. Galley veered. Line grew taut, jerking flagship sideways. Crowd of Ironborn roared curses. Bronn whooped. Now while she's broadside. Crew cranked. He sighted mid-hull. Hand steady, despite tremor. Loose. Bolts slammed into exposed planking. Water erupted through gap as hull heaved. Seconds later, another Scorpion on adjacent platform fired. Strike near same mark. Waves pounded wound. Wood groaned. Then a flash. lightning-speared mast of Braavosi galley, turning sail into fire lantern. Flames raced rope, but not before tether forced flagship aground on submerged rock shelf. Keel split audible even over storm. Bronn watched wide-eyed as the mighty ship listed, water spouting up along deck seams. Ironborn scrambled, cutting rope, but too late. She slid, groaning, into breaker line, stuck fast. He slapped crew's shoulders. "Buy those volantines a cask. They just won us a damn republic." Cheers rose, ragged but fierce. Oh. When news reached Winterfell via soaked raven, Sansa allowed herself first full breath since dawn. She stood before hearth and solar, council gathered, steam rising from their cloaks. "Flagship grounded," she announced. "Breakwater holds. Remaining Kraken ships retreating under gale." "Nee." Relief rippled. Smiles, sighs, Sam dropping quill in astonishment. Yet, Jon remained pensive. Ironborn retreat, but survivors still shore. Pockets of reavers inland. "We'll need sweeps." "And captives," Davos added. "Ransom buys repairs." "Ransom buys widow's bread," Sansa said. "Council authorizes bargaining once prisoners secured." Lyanna leaned on spear. "Scalp wound stitched, but fresh. Bear Island will guard coast, but next storm will bring more. Drowned men rise relentless." Sansa met her gaze. "Then we stand relentless." She looked round table. "Tonight we mourn and mend. Tomorrow the chamber convenes to draft coastal charter. Permanent guard and shipwright funds independent of any lord's coffers." Brenna nodded. "Commons will approve." They saw smoke on horizon. Sam lifted parchment. Preliminary tallies. 5 wolf ships lost. 3 Braavosi, 12 Kraken sunk or captured. North casualties estimated 300. Ironborn more than 1,000. A hush. Sansa closed eyes briefly. "Ring bells for the fallen at sunset. Let their names be read in Common's record." Jon shifted. "Sister, Chancellor, there's matter of Viscount Greyjoy. His corpse not among dead." Lyanna growled. "We'll hunt him." Sansa opened eyes, gleam hard. "Hell crawl somewhere to lick wounds, but his song ends the moment he trespasses again." Draft message to Pike. "North proposes summit to bury dead. If they refuse, the Republic will proceed with blockade." She turned to Sam. "Add that to letter." "Yes, Chancellor." Thunder boomed again. Softer. Moving east. Brienne laid sword across gauntlets in gesture almost ceremonial. "We held Sansa." The people saw. Sansa stepped to window. Storm clouds parted, revealing sliver of late afternoon sun, painting wet roofs copper. Smoke still curled from distant wrecks, yet harbor stood. Bells began tolling. Slow, deep. The sound drifted over wind, carrying weight of lives and promise. She whispered, "Winterfell stands and the North stands with her." Behind her, the council remained silent, each turning inward, tallying cost. But on streets below, she could already hear faint shouts. Relief mixing with pride. And the echo of children laughing somewhere near the broken wall, where they had gathered sling stones at dawn. The Republic had survived its first storm of iron and fire. Others would come. Her bones knew that truth. But tonight, between crackling hearth and rain-washed air, Sansa Stark allowed herself to believe that hearts, once awakened, might never again surrender to crowns. Snowflakes fluttered against the window pane, soft and transient, yet countless. She watched them melt upon the warmed lead, each leaving a tiny mark that vanished almost instantly. Brief lives, yet together they had softened the blow of every arrow, muffled thunder of every hoof. Together, they had become a blanket that shielded the North through endless, brutal winters. So too would her people, she thought. So too would her Republic. Okay. Rain drummed on the slate roofs of Winterfell throughout the night following the bells, steady as a drummer's roll at halftime. And by dawn, a thin fog clung to every courtyard like the residue of passing ghosts. The battle was over. The Dead Moon Storm, as people had already named it, had scraped the sky bare of its last black clouds and slipped east across the bight. leaving broken masts strewn in shallows, and a republic not yet 2 seasons old forced abruptly into the long work. The first sunlight, weak, almost apologetic, diffused through vapor and touched the soot-blackened ramparts with palest gold. Sansa did not greet the dawn from the walls. She was in the library, where the fire had been coaxed alive by a bleary-eyed page an hour before. The table before her was a low hill of parchments, casualty scrolls, shipwright inventories, petitions from Wintertown midwives, asking for wax and linen, now that grain rationing had begun to pinch. Beside the heap lay a single strip of wet vellum, warped at the edges, ink running in places where rain had entered the Raven's traveling tube. It bore the seal of Moat Cailin, a crude pressing of mud and straw that served for wax in the neck. Riders from the Children's Tower had reached Greywater Watch yesterday with word of the Ironborn rout, and Howland Reed's answering message was short and spare. Moat secure, neck flooding, southern traders willing to barter lampreys, wary of Brotherhood raids. Reed had closed with an oblique warning. Crocodile songs in the reeds tonight. Step softly in the dark. Sansa smoothed the damp vellum, trying to glean nuance from the Swamp Lord's riddling style. Crocodile songs, she murmured, glancing toward the candle flame. It could mean many things. Spy thrushes from the south, Brotherhood agents drifting through neck villages, or perhaps only that Howland wished her to know the frogs were mating early this year. She tucked the strip into a leather folio and forced her thoughts toward the day's schedule. The Chamber of Commons would reconvene at second hour to register war dead and allocate ships for salvage. Samuel had compiled 3 possible funding ledgers, each a different poison to swallow, all necessary. Then there was the matter of the Ironborn prisoners quartered in the Wolf's Den at Wide Harbor. Lord Manderley had sent a letter in his rounded courtly hand. Captives number 241. 31 grievously wounded, 11 beyond saving. Harbor folk demand proof of justice. Fishmongers threaten strike if reavers are ransomed without blood price. Manderley, practical even in outrage, suggested employing the prisoners to dredge the harbor mouth, silted by the storm. Davos favored ransoms. John would prefer paroles, provided an unbreakable oath could be contrived. But northern small folk seldom trusted oaths sworn by seaborne tongues. Sansa rubbed the bridge of her nose, feeling exhaustion pool between her eyes. Brienne entered unhelmeted, fresh from the yard, hair damp against her temples. Ranger patrols report calm seas for now. The last wreck burned out before dawn. We've posted crows on every mast south of Seal Bay. 24 reavers tried landing near the Flint Cliffs, but Jones' riders cut them off. Prisoners, no deaths. Good, Sansa answered, though her mind had already skipped ahead. Ask Sir Davos to draft a work charter for the captives. No branding, no mutilations. Hard labor with full rations. Ninsel Wayne. Some of the chamber deputies will call that mercy gone too far. Then let them stand watch at the den and explain to mothers why hoping for sons to return whole is a crime. The words came sharper than intended. She offered an apologetic glance, but Brienne only nodded, understanding too well the cost of tempered steel. A thin page knocked, admitted himself at her gesture, and announced that the speaker awaited beneath the Weeping Tower with a delegation from Wintertown. Tanners, potters, a pair of vintners whose cellar had flooded during the storm. They had come, he explained, to deliver the storm tithe barrels, the voluntary levy of supplies promised whenever Winterfell's walls bled. The page's cheeks burned at the formal language. He was 14. Sansa recalled, the blacksmith's nephew. The Republic's reach even into the small bones of children. Thank them, she said, rising. I will greet them in the yard. She gathered her cloak, the wool still stiff where salt from last night's rain had dried, and stepped into the corridor. The yard outside the gatehouse was a bustle of wagons despite the hour. 2 broad-shouldered tanners in seal fur cloaks were rolling casks of rendered fat toward the kitchens. A cooper had carved the wolf crest into each barrel head, precise and proud. Speaker Brenna Tallheart stood with arms folded, directing the traffic as though born to the task. Her cheeks were wind-burned rosy, her nose red as a late apple. When she saw Sansa, she offered a crisp nod. Chancellor, she called, the storm didn't drown our gratitude. 10 barrels tallow, 5 of lamp oil, 3 of smoked pork from the old sow that died by lightning, and a cart of elderberry cordial for the maesters. The vintners swear it's medicine. Nah. You shame us with your generosity. Sansa touched the rim of one cask, making certain all could see the gesture. My council will enter every name in the public ledger. The Republic lives on such gifts. Ay, Brenna said, lowering her voice as the tanners rolled past. And on memory of debts paid in old wars. Folk remember the fires of the long night, Chancellor. They'll not see that fire and ironborn torches again if they can help it. Then Sansa felt warmth seep through the exhaustion. Tell them their faith is returned in full. She turned as another voice called her name. Arya emerged from the armory door, clapping dust from her breeches, a leather jerkin half buckled over dark wool. Needle rode at her hip. She looked better for sleep, her eyes less sunken, but the line of her shoulders suggested restless energy. The granary roof's patched, she announced without preamble. Saboteurs won't find dry tinder in that loft again. Did the prisoner talk? Only nonsense and spittle. Arya shrugged. Some men cling to silence because they believe it's armor. He'll break when he sees daylight through the bars. Sansa studied her sister's face. The small scar at the brow, the subtle tightness around the mouth when certain memories nudged. I'd ask you to rest, but I know the answer. Arya's lips twitched. Rest is a chair without legs. She gestured toward the gate. I'm riding for the sea. John flagged a corpse cart south of the estuary. Believes Viscount Greyjoy might be among them. If not a corpse, perhaps a trail. Nendoan. The name dropped into the yard like an ill-weathered spear. Sansa hid her shiver behind a slow breath. Vicon had vanished in the chaos, last seen bleeding into the surf. Reports disagreed. One sailor swore he saw the Kraken captain hauled aboard a dory. Another claimed the Bear Islanders cut him down on the Shrike's deck. Until a body lay under Winterfell's crypts, the threat endured. Take 6 rangers, Sansa said, and a maester's kit for the dead. We'll want proper tally. No. Arya inclined her head. 6 rangers and a wooden box. I can manage. Then, in a softer key, try the soup this morning. Cook spiced it with the last of the summer cumin, taste of Dorne, she said. Sansa smiled despite herself. When Arya vanished into the milling wagons, Sansa turned toward the stables, wanting a moment alone with the castle's quietest walls. She passed under the weeping tower arch, boots crunching grit, and felt the pulse of Winterfell in the stones. The warm hum of hot springs, the deeper echo of ancestral heartbeat. That sound steadied her as she entered the stable's dim hush. Inside, a lanky stable boy was brushing a shaggy garron. He bowed, eyes wide, then returned to his work silently. Sansa moved to the stall where Lady's daughter, a pale gray filly gifted by Jon last solstice, stood chewing oats. She stroked the horse's muzzle, breathing the earthy smell of hay and leather. For a heartbeat, she allowed herself to lean into the living warmth, letting the terror of storms and fleets seep away. A clatter of approaching hooves broke the stillness. A courier dismounted just beyond the gate, cloak streaming rainwater. "Raven from River Run," he called. "Urgent for the Chancellor." She stepped back into the courtyard as the man jogged toward her. Scroll held out. The wax was fresh, stamped with the leaping trout. In recent months, Edmure Tully had grown generous with ink. He saw in the Northern Experiment a hope he dared mirror in the Riverlands. But urgent seldom meant good. She cracked the seal. A fine spray of rain spattered the parchment edges as her eyes darted line to line. The message was concise. Bread riots at Harrenhal. Lord Harmon Piper killed in alley outside the old Beller Septity. Brotherhood banners sighted among mob doit. River lords request northern mediation before chaos spreads to Maidenpool. And his postscript in Edmure's hurried scrawl. My envoys whisper the Brotherhood speaks of crowning a king who bleeds tide water, not snow. We'll send full a report when blood dries, else pray for wet snow. Sansa folded the letter, thumb lingering on the words crowning a king. There were still those who believed crowns solved hunger. They would chip jewels from starving mouths, if only they could hear the jangle. Brienne appeared, concern etching her brow. Ill news. Restless news, Sansa said. The storm we weathered may have shifted south. Will the chambers send aid? They must. She gazed toward the south gate, imagining roads half submerged in spring floods. But first we must finish burying our own dead. That afternoon the great hall transformed into a silent river of names. Samuel stood at the high end, parchment unrolled to the floor, reading in steady cadence as deputies added counters to wide bowls. Polished river stones for the living, blackened chestnuts for the dead, smooth silver buttons for the missing. There were so many buttons. The bowls filled, emptied into larger baskets, filled again. The clack and rustle became a heartbeat. Once, in King's Landing, Sansa had attended court where petitioners wept for wartime losses. The Queen Regent had listened behind a fan of peacock feathers. Comfort measured in coin promises seldom kept. Here, tear-streaked carpenters and salt-caked fisherwives sat on benches once reserved for banners and listened to their neighbors' sons read names aloud. There was no gilded ceiling to catch their grief, only smoke-dark beams and the shared awareness of stone beneath their boots. Yet somehow the weight of mourning felt lighter, borne across many shoulders. When the list ended, Samuel's voice cracked on the final syllable. He folded the parchment with trembling hands, placed it atop the altar table, and stepped back. Brenna Talhart rose, cheeks glistening, and lifted the speaker's hammer. She struck once, the hollow note echoing. The Republic records it's dead. May their voices yet circle these walls in council. The deputies murmured assent. Sansa remained still beside the dais, fingers curled at her sides. She wanted to speak. Words of comfort, of purpose. But silence felt truer. She let the hush linger until sobs subsided into collective breathing. Only then did she step forward. These stones and buttons will be buried at sunset beneath a heart tree. Their count will guide our levies and our harvests, but their memory will guide our law. We build so that no life is spent for a crown's vanity again. Mesjam. No applause followed, no roar. Instead, a quiet murmur of agreement rippled. Soft yet certain, and she knew it carried farther than thunder. That evening the small council gathered in the Queen's old solar. The title still clung to the chamber, though no monarch resided. A single candle on the map table pooled light over gathered faces. Davos smelling of pitch and salt. Brienne still in half-mail. Sam in ink-stained robes. Jon recently returned from patrol with a sheen of sleet on his curls. Arya absent on her errand. Lyanna Mormont sat stiff-backed despite stitches at her hairline. And Speaker Brenna had joined at Sansa's insistence. The Republic's heart must be present in its ribs. Davos opened a sea chart. Braavosi captains pledge 4 hulls to remain on Station 6 moons. Price reduced due to shared plunder. He tapped ink black crosses. We can rotate 2 to Bear Isle per fortnight for provisioning. Funds? Sansa asked. Sam replied, if we forgo the King's Road paving another season, we can pay the Braavosi and still repair Harbor Breckwall. It means another muddy thaw for the inland towns. In? Jon shrugged. Mud keeps men home to grow oats. Until trade wagons bog, Brenna countered. But the coast must stay clear first. Lyanna sipped willow bark tea. Maester Wolkin's prescription. The Ironborn are licking wounds, but by high summer their shipyards will boil. We need not outbuild them. Only make each harbor a wolf's maw. Agreed. Sansa paced 2 steps. The prisoners will dredge White Harbor to deepen draft. When they've earned bread, we release them on parole under bond to Lord Manderley. They must pledge no raiding north of the Sisters for 10 years. Me. Jon frowned. A bond means nothing to Ironborn law, which is why bondkeepers will be Braavosi, Sansa said. Even Krakens fear the Sea Lord's ledger. Davos barked a laugh. Aye, a man may spit on a treaty, but he'll not cross a Braavosi account keeper. Then it's settled. Sansa glanced to Sam, who scribbled. Next, River Run. The Brotherhood has spilled Lord's blood in open riot. Edmure seeks mediation. Our charter forbids exporting arms yet. But we can send grain and words. Jon leaned elbows on wood. Words weigh little beside hunger. If Riverlanders starve, they'll take up crowns or torches, whichever fills a belly faster. The chamber's seed stores stand healthy after last harvest, Brenna offered. We could spare 40 wagons, more if the Bravosi loan lasts. Sam's quill paused. 40 wagons leaves our own reserve thin for a hard winter. Winter hardens what spring softens, Brienne said quietly. Better allies fed than walls besieged come frost. Sansa absorbed the hum of caution and courage weighing. 40 wagons, with promise of another 40 after next moose levy, if the Riverlands commit to Republican forums. She met Brenna's gaze. Invite envoys to observe our commons. Let them see grain counted stone by stone. Brenna nodded. Lyanna set Mug down. And if the Brotherhood's crown forger sits among those envoys? Arya's voice floated from the doorway. Then a sister's needle might thread his throat. She entered damp-booted, tugging gloves loose. Sansa felt surge of relief. We found the corpse cart, Arya continued. 7 dead reavers, none vicond. But tracks cut inland. He lives. No, but... John's jaw tightened. Then he heads for Barrowlands, empty holds for hiding, small villages to loot. Or east to rout his men, Davos suggested. Captain without crew? He'll gather the scattered. Sansa inhaled. We'll post rewards for any sighting. Ghost Scouts will track. But we must not drift chasing phantoms south while building foundations here. Sam lowered parchment. There is still the matter of the Brotherhood cell in Wintertown. The prisoner admitted 3 sleepers remain. Let him show them, Arya said. Then strip his mask in the square. Traitors hate sunlight. Done. Brenna frowned. Public unmasking courts. Mob justice. Mob justice is still justice, Arya retorted. Sansa lifted hand. There will be a tribunal, open, but bound by charter. Speaker Brenna will preside with Maester Wolkan and Lord Serwyn as peers. The people will watch the law they forged defend itself. It was agreed. Candles burned low. Plans coalesced like frost rims on glass. Before dismissing the council, Sansa reached into a pocket and produced a small wooden token carved with a direwolf crossed by sheaves. Maester Wolkan finished the first draft of the citizen tokens. 1 for every man, woman and child counted in the last tally. Presented at market, it proves right to vote, to speak, to eat from state stores in famine. She set it on the table where flame licked shadows. Let us ensure the law behind this token never falters. 2 days later, the tribunal convened in Winterfell's yard, snowflakes swirling in pale vortexes between onlookers bundled in half-dry furs. A makeshift platform had been erected against the western wall. The accused Brotherhood agent stood manacled at its center, bruises yellowing beneath stubble, eyes sun-squinted after cellar dark. Beside him, a short lectern supported a copy of the Covenant Charter. Its pages were weighted by a polished river stone, the symbol of the vote. Speaker Brenna opened with formal reading of the charges: arson, treason, conspiracy to deny food to the commons. For each, she read the sentence recommended by Law.Wall. The crowd murmured at treason, death by rope, but hushed as Brenna reminded them the charter allowed clemency for confession and service. Sansa watched from the foremost row, flanked by Brienne and Davos. She studied the man's posture, neither proud nor abject, merely resigned. When invited to speak, he lifted chin. I believed crowns make order, he said, voice hoarse. I was taught small folk cannot rule. I came to burn grain so lordly famine would remind you of need for kings. Someone in the rear shouted, fool. Another threw a snowball that exploded against the platform post. Brenna rapped gavel once. The prisoner continued. Yet in the darkness, I was fed. A child brought me broth. She said her father died at sea fighting krakens, and the Republic would bury him with honors despite birth. I thought, if such mercy lives, maybe crowns weigh less than hearts. Damn. A hush. Sansa felt skin prickle under cloak. The man bowed head. I confess. I offer service. 100 days cleaning privies, dredging harbors, anything. Let me put back grain I sought to burn. The crowd turned restless, uncertain. Brenna looked to her fellow judges. Maester Wolkan whispered. Lord Serwyn nodded slowly. Brenna faced the people. The charter instructs us to balance justice with redemption. She lifted the river stone from the charter and held it high. Let this stone decide. If the commons will accept his service, shout aye. If not, silence will answer. Wind sighed across the yard. For a heartbeat, no voice rose. Then, a woman, Sansa recognized one of the tanners, called, "Hey!" Another joined, then a cluster. Soon a wave of eyes rolled across, uneven yet unmistakable. Brenna's shoulders eased. "So recorded," she said, and struck gavel. "The prisoner shall serve 1 year labor in harbor dredging, under seal of Manderley." The crowd released collective breath. Some cheered, some muttered. Justice, imperfect and living, had spoken with many tongues. Sansa exhaled, chest hollowing. She caught Brienne's faint smile, Devos nod. Progress not in marble edicts, but in the willingness to grant second chances. A fortnight passed. Snow melted into chilled rain that turned Wintertown's lanes to gray slurry. Repair of harbor chain links occupied most daylight. By night, council scribes drafted grain contract terms for Edmure's envoys. Scouts hunted Vicon across the Barrowlands, following rumors of a limping giant with red-dyed braids. Twice they found slaughtered sheep, once an abandoned fisher's hut with blood on the doorjamb, but no captain. Ghost ranged ahead, silent and white against the last drifts. Rangers nabbed 2 more Brotherhood sleepers. One, a blacksmith's nephew, the other a seamstress whose father had died at the Green Fork under Robb's banners. Their capture shook Wintertown, for both had lived beneath those roofs since childhood. Sansa ordered their tribunal postponed until the Riverland envoys arrived, so all could witness the consequences of divided loyalties. On the 5th day of thaw, a rider from Moat Cailin arrived, mud spattered to the waist. He carried no parchment, only a memory of words spoken in haste by Howland Reed. Ships from the south, banners of the Crowned Stag, 30 strong moving upriver under Parley flag. Reed had watched through a reed screen, counted hulls, marked catapult arms despite the white flag. He warned the fleet would reach the neck within a week. Sansa convened council before midnight. Lightning flickered through rain-smeared glass as they gathered. King Gendry sends envoys, Davos guessed. 30 ships, rather grand for delegation. Sam adjusted spectacles. They may bear supplies to woo our market, or armies to claim they come in peace, Lyanna growled. Jon leaned over the fresh map Reed had drawn. Moat Cailin stands guard. If the stag intends force, he must break the causeway. Reed's bog skirmishers can stall them a moon. Brienne shook head. Stalling invites siege. Wintertown stores thin. Sansa tapped the map. We answer Parley flag with our own. I will ride to the moat, meet these envoys before ink dries on their manifesto. Then, a startled silence. Sam opened his mouth. She raised palm. The Republic must meet southern eyes without shields. I will take a modest guard. Brian, Lyanna, a dozen rangers, and Speaker Brenna. Jon commands Winterfell in my absence. Davos oversees coast. Brenna frowned. The Commons will protest losing their chancellor mid-thaw. The Commons elected a government, not a statue. Sansa's tone gentled. A ship floats on tide because water moves beneath. So must its captain roam deck. Jon met her gaze. A flicker of worry shadowing the gray. If it is trap. I trust in your walls and in Arya's shadows, she said. Voice soft but unbreakable. She turned to Brienne. Have horses readied at first dawn. We ride light. The journey south through the neck was slow despite light kit. Swollen rivers forced detours, and every bridge looked ready to spill its guts beneath a horse's weight. The air smelled of peat and rot, but frogs sang lustily, and white herons stalked shallows. Lyanna complained of damp arrow fletching. Brenna joked it would teach Bear and Smith alike to love the sun. Even Brienne chuckled. On the 3rd night, mists thickened into walls. Reed's outriders emerged like shadows. Faces streaked green-brown and guided them to Greywater Watch, still half myth to most northerners. Halls of woven willow rose on drifting islands, torches flickering through reed curtains. Howland Reed met them barefoot on a log pier. gray hair plastered to brow, spear in hand, as though expecting wraiths. He greeted Sansa with solemn nod, then led them to a circular lodge where hot bog tea steamed. "The royal fleet halts at Stonehenge Landing," he reported. "They wait, conference." Crest of crowned stag quartered with lions still flutters, yet I saw no gold cloaks. Soldiers wear blue tabards marked with hammer and rising sun. Gendry's new livery, Davos had once described. Sansa folded arms. How many? 400 foot, a score of knights. Trebuchets collapsed for travel but present. Enough to build a siege line if they wish. Reed's eyes held swamp twilight. They claim peace. Their messenger left this. He produced a ribbon of parchment, soaked stiff. On it, in neat western scrawl, King offers trade accord and counsel on pirate threat. Requires meeting on neutral ground with proper hostages for safety. Lyanna spat into fire pit. Neutral ground means flat ground where cavalry can charge. Sansa traced the words. "We accept, under our terms. We choose the ground, the causeway moat above the old salt spring. Reed's archers hold the mists. Rangers line timberline. Envoys bring 5, we bring 5. We bring 5. She looked to Reed. "Will the bog obey?" Reed's thin smile creased mud paint. "The bog obeys no one, but it dislikes metal boots." Plans formed by Reedlight. Brienne marked watch points. Lyanna drilled rangers on silent spear formations. Speaker Brenna rehearsed grain price translations. Sansa sat apart, penning 2 copies of her proposed treaty. One for Gendry's envoys, one for the chamber should she not return. That night sleep came shallow. Dreams of crowns rusting beneath black water chased her. Voices echoed like frogs. Queens die, but covenants drown slower. She woke before dawn, heart rattling, and stepped outside. Mist clung to the water's glassy skin. Somewhere unseen a crocodile, maybe Reed's metaphor, maybe not, broke the surface with languid ripple. She watched until it slipped away. The parley occurred on the 6th day of rain. A crude dais of oak planks straddled a low rise above waterlogged fields. To both sides rushes bent under weight of hidden archers. Sansa rode to the cusp, flanked by Brienne and Howland, their horses snorting at bog scents. Opposite, a tall figure in blue and gold, dismounted. He wore a blacksmith's hammer across breast, a nod to Gendry's beginnings. His beard was trimmed, his expression studiously neutral. "Sirs," Sansa greeted, voice carrying across shallow pools. "You tread northern soil. State your intent." The man introduced himself as Sir Tormund Wild, Master of Coin to King Gendry. He unfurled a calfskin scroll, held high so damp reeds would not lick it. "The Crown of the Seven seeks friendship with its northern neighbor, offers lenient tariffs on timber, naval alliance against Ironborn resurgence, and recognition of the Northern Charter, provided," here he paused, "provided the Republic pledges no harbor to dragon pretenders, or foreign cells hostile to Crown." Sansa measured the wording. "The North harbors only its own, and her ports open to honest trade. Our charter forbids conquest fleets. As to dragons, none roost here." She remembered Drogon's shadow once crossing King's Landing, and wondered whether rumors of hidden eggs still nested south. "Your tariffs?" Wild detailed grain corridors, timber quotas, a luxury fur excise. Some clauses stank of exploitation, but others offered genuine partnership, joint patrols at Sea Dragon Point, shared rebuild of Nightfort as neutral embassy site. Sansa listened, interjecting when boundaries blurred. The neck belonged wholly north, not shared. Any joint garrison would bear equal banners. Wildly ceded points with polite reluctance. Midway through debate, voices rose behind royal retinue. A rider pelted from rear ranks, shouting. Another galloped ahead to intercept, raising arms. Sansa's guards half drew, but Wild barked for discipline. The messenger leaned to his ear, whispering with wild gestures. The Master of Coin's face tightened. "What trouble?" Sansa asked, controlling breath. Wild composed himself. "A lord of your realm, that Greyjoy wretch, laid ambush on our supply barge 3 miles downriver. He flies a wolf banner. He met her eyes. Explain. Lyanna snarled. Vikon's no wolf. Sansa's pulse raced. If he flew a wolf, it was stolen. We hunt the man across moors. How many casualties? Wild's jaw worked. 5 crown men slain. 6 wounded. Barge lost. The king will not accept friendly terms if northern lords raid under false colors. Sansa felt the fragile bridge of diplomacy crack underfoot. Allow my rangers to track him now. Return with proof of his treason and recompense for your losses. Wild conferred with his knights. Tension crackled. Finally he nodded curtly. 3 days. Produce the head or the man. Then we talk tariff. Sansa agreed. Hostages were exchanged. Brienne crossing to royal camp. Ser Jorah Peak to northern lines. Then both parties withdrew into mists heavy with mistrust. Hunt for Vikon unfurled like nightmare across sodden flats. Ghost found the first sign. Hoofprints mixed with waterlogged footprints along a causeway ridge, leading into half-collapsed tower, once used by Crannog anglers. Inside they found 3 crown soldiers, throttled. Throats slit by curved blade. A crude wolf banner, paint still wet, hung from rafters. Arya arrived the next dawn, having ridden through the marsh night by heart's compass. She crouched near the dead. This paint not an hour before blood dried. He mocks us. Jon wiped mud from a boot print. Ironborn boot lacks heel plate. This track has metal ring. Vikon stole boots from slain envoy. Sansa knelt, ignoring chill. He turns our allies to enemies. We must end it before dawn of the 3rd day. They split forces. Arya and Reed's marshwalkers slipped northeast. Jon led rangers south along riverbank. Lyanna guarded royal hostages at camp, promising to break kneecaps of any man who twitched. Sansa remained at Reed's tower, coordinating ravens, though every nerve itched to ride out sword drawn. Night fell. A wet, black drapery. Frogs croaked funeral chorales. Sansa paced the tower's low walkway, torch guttering. Memories haunted. Joffrey sneered behind a crown's spikes. Ramsay's grin as Winterfell burned. But louder still Ned's calm eyes reminding her of duty. Winter wolves guard those who cannot guard themselves. She wrapped cloak tighter and waited. Near dawn a horn bleated thrice. Ranger signal south shore. Quarry sighted. Sansa mounted before messenger reached the stable. She galloped with 2 guards along reed-choked path, lit only by ghostly glow of nearing sunrise. The trail opened onto stone ruins of a first men cairn. Smoke drifted in ragged column. Jon stood amid toppled stones, cloak slick with dew, sword tip resting on muddy moss. At his feet knelt a broad-shouldered man bound by willow rope, red braids clinging to soaked leather. Vikon Greyjoy, beard matted with blood, eyes fixed on middle distance as though watching boat sails. Ghost crouched behind, silent white fury. Sansa dismounted, boots sinking. "You wore our banner," she said, voice like river ice. Vikon's cracked lips curled. "Stole it. Knows how it feels now. To have colors robbed. North steals seas. Call it republic. I repay." Jon's sword lowered, but his stare remained steel. "You killed envoys in cold blood." "Cold? Blood is blood." Vikon spat pink. "Ironborn answer theft with reaving. All no price." Sansa crouched, meeting his dark gaze. "You will answer with life. But not today." She straightened, facing the marsh. "Jon, take him to royal camp. Let King Gendry's men see the thief who falsely bore our wolf." "Maybe more to me, sir." Vikon laughed raspily. "Stag King will thank you then chain you. Wolves always kneel to south in end." Jon gagged him with strip of sailcloth. "Not these wolves." Returning the prisoner to wild shifted tides. The royal envoys beheld Vikon's bonds, heard his confession, extracted with Arya's quiet methods, and saw the wolf banner doused in swamp water. They could not deny the evidence. On the parley, Dace Wild signed provisional accords, 10% timber duty, mutual patrol commission, neutrality pledges regarding dragons. Sansa affixed the direwolf seal. The alliance was fragile, but real. Brienne crossed back as hostages were exchanged. Sansa embraced her, relief unstitching knots in spine. "Tell the chamber," she said, "the Republic is recognized. Not by war, but by word." Brienne's smile was weary and bright. "And by the promise of ships against pirates." "Promises we will keep," Sansa vowed. The return to Winterfell coincided with first budburst on alder branches. Spring had come late. But it had come. Children splashed through puddles shouting news of Southern accord. Smiths banged tin in celebration. Even the grave faces at the Wolf's Den allowed crooked grins. The bells rang thrice, once for victory, once for justice, once for alliance. In the great hall the chamber gathered to ratify treaty. Sansa spoke little, her voice hoarse. But when deputies raised the vote tokens in unanimous acceptance, she felt warmth bloom behind her eyes. The sound of wooden tokens clacking onto tabletops was the sweetest music she had known. That night, under a sky rinsed clean by storms, she walked alone to the Godswood. Lantern in hand, she approached the heart tree where snow still clung in crevices. She touched the smooth bark, closed her eyes. "Father," she thought, "I did not bring home a crown. I brought home a promise that no child of the North will kneel where they should stand. I hope that is enough." Wind rustled limbs. A single leaf, born out of season, stubborn as any northerner, spiraled down and landed on her palm. She smiled. Behind her footsteps whispered. Arya emerged, arms folded. "Council wonders why Chancellor attends moonlight instead of feast. I wanted a quieter table." Arya grinned. "There's stew left. And Speaker Brenna brewing pine honey ale." Sansa looped arm through hers. "Then let's drink to stubborn leaves." The sisters walked back beneath starlight winding over Winterfell's towers. Somewhere a bard strummed a rough tune. Verses half made, but carrying words already on every tongue. Of wolves and ships, of bells and stones, of a north that chose itself. And high above, the moon. Thin, bright, unblinking. Poured silver over new bud branches, over ramparts scarred and healing, over the republic they had dared to raise amid snow and storm. And yeah, the mid-spring sun glimmered pale above Winterfell's eastern walls, its warmth sluggish but stubborn, like a hearth that refused to go out, though every draught conspired to smother it. Thin blades of emerald grass now speared through patches of gray, and little cataracts of meltwater spilled from crenel gutters to purl down the outer keep and vanish into steaming channels below. The air retained a bite. Wind still carried a tang of snowfield and pine sap. But spring was undeniably present, and its arrival infused the castle with a restless, almost giddy energy. Chickens clucked in the bailey where only weeks before men had hammered spearheads, and 3 shaggy goats had been tethered in the southwest corner to crop early shoots sprouting against the wall. The goats bleated often. Their plaintive notes mingled strangely with the ring of anvils from Gendry Wolken Forge, newly rechristened in honor of uneasy friendship, and with the occasional bursts of children's laughter drifting up from Wintertown's muddy lanes. Sansa Stark crossed the outer yard with Brienne beside her, boots squishing in melt mud that smelled of thawed earth and forge smoke. She had spent the dawn hours revisiting the glass gardens, where Maester Wolken's apprentices coaxed tomato seedlings up cane splints while reciting the Covenant preamble as a mnemonics, an idea Samwell had conceived to make civic duty bloom alongside crops. The words mingled with the scent of damp soil, until the charter seemed to grow out of the very peat. Now she aimed for the north gate. 30 paces ahead, a supply train prepared to roll. 4 stout wagons heavy with barley seed, flax bolts, iron hoops, and tallow candles. Painted on the lead wagon's canvas in bold white strokes was the leaping wolf and sheaves device that had become emblem of the northern commons. 24 rangers in half-plate stood as escort, longbows unstrung but slung over shoulders. Beyond, 3 Riverland envoys waited astride sleek geldings. Each wore a blue sash stitched with small white trout. The Riverlands answered to Republican tokens now traveling the roads everywhere in satchels. Sansa felt an unbidden swell of pride. The grain convoy marked the first tangible fruit of the treaty with Edmure Tully, ratified by the Commons only yesterday. 40 wagons over 2 fortnights, 20 now, 20 after next moose levy, would relieve Harrenhal's riots and tide Maidenpool bakeries until summer harvest. In return, Riverland Ironwood would come north to rebuild a collapsed span of the King's Road, and Tully scribes would share copies of ancient covenant scrolls from the Age of Abundance. Barley for books, Sam had quipped, and Sansa had treasured the phrase. As she approached, the captain of Rangers, Olivar Harl, snapped a salute. He was only 20, and excitement quavered under the drilled calm. Wheels greased, Chancellor. Teams watered. We're ready. Sansa inspected stirrup straps, tamped tarp lashings, and finally met the Riverlander's eyes. May the causeway treat you gentle and the neck's mists guide you true. The bog walkers have signaled clear trails, but stay upon the flaunting posts. The neck forgets strangers quickly. Lady Serena Vance, eldest of the envoys, dipped her chin. We will tread the wolf's path, Chancellor. Harrenhal's cauldrons thank you. Brienne produced a small oak coffer. Inside lay a sheaf of parchment bearing the seal of the Chamber of Commons, proof of consignment. Serena tucked it into her saddlebags, then signaled her riders forward. Horses clopped across the drawbridge. Wagon wheels creaked. Rangers marched to either flank. On the far bank, townsfolk gathered to cheer. Someone struck a drum in slow cadence. 15 beats. One for each fallen ship in the Deadmoon storm. The sound rolled north to south like distant thunder. Sansa watched until the convoy vanished round a bend where hazel thickets blurred the road. Only then did she exhale. Every outward breath felt like releasing an arrow held too long to bowstring. Brienne observed her. You could have sent a steward to oversee loading. Symbol matters, Sansa replied. They need to see the Chancellor on the ramparts, not only parchments with her seal. She glanced skyward, where a rook wheeled, cawing. Besides, goodbyes remind me why the ink on scrolls must hold. They returned through the gate, into the keep's relative hush. Brienne peeled off toward the yard where her pupils, the Broom Brigade, Castle Gossip called them, hacked at straw dummies with mismatched blades. Sansa climbed the western stair to her solar to face another stack of petitions. Fisherfolk at Widow's Watch wished to form a co-op netting company. The Free Folk Trade Council proposed a summer fair inside the shattered shell of Last Hearth. A deputation from the Citadel offered to station 2 neutral conclave observers at Winterfell, in exchange for library access. Each request pulsed with potential, and each asked for coin, grain, or blankets the North hardly possessed. She settled at the broad oak table and reached for the first scrawl, but before ink met quill, a knock rapped. Jon Snow entered. He wore travel leathers, hair damp from melted sleet, ghost padding behind like pale smoke. His expression balanced gravity and something close to boyish wonder. They found it, he said without greeting. Found what? He produced a bundle wrapped in oilcloth, laid it on the corner desk, and unrolled the layers. A torn square of black wool, stitched with gold thread, emerged. Half of the Kraken sigil, severed. Asha's scouts recovered this from cliffs near the Shivering Sea, part of Vicon's private banner. They tracked blood over 3 ridges. No corpse, but drag marks and boot prints lead to a sea cave. The entrance collapsed recently, likely storm surge. So the sea buried him. Relief rippled through her chest, tempered by caution. Proof enough for crown envoys? Joan's eyes shadowed. Wild sailed home satisfied, but crowns remember debts. And Ironborn love ghosts. Vicon's legend may prove stronger drowned. Why no. Sansa brushed a finger along salt-stiff fringe. Then we speak his name less, and our labor louder. Jon grunted approval. The chamber votes on Ranger expansion tomorrow. I'll answer questions. He lingered as if weighing other words, then nodded and left, ghost trailing. Alone again, Sansa placed the Kraken remnant atop an iron plate and held it above a candle. Flame lit cloth, devouring gold thread, until only a curl of black smoke remained. She opened the window lattice. The smoke ribboned into open sky. 2 days later, the Commons passed the Ranger Merit Law by a margin of 182 to 39. Samuel recorded the vote with trembling excitement. The first standing force in northern history anchored not to a lord, but to a rulebook. Recruits would drill at an inland camp near Long Lake, answerable to a tri-council of Jon Snow, Brenna Tallhart, and Sir Davos. Funding came through a halfpenny toll on southern merchant wagons, an idea proposed by a potter's daughter during open floor. Watching her fellow deputies adopt it had drawn cheers nearly as loud as victory bells. Lyanna Mormont celebrated by challenging any doubter to spar on the green. She broke 3 practice shields and 2 ribs, one of them her own, before dusk. Sansa spent the evening mending political ribs instead, calming inland millers incensed by new tolls. She argued that safe roads guaranteed grain reached markets unburnt. Some remained skeptical, but when a ranger patrol captured 2 highway robbers the very next dawn, approval among the millers rose like bread. Spring matured. Blossom clusters dotted the godswood hawthorns, pale as snowflakes reborn. Road crews dragged gravel to spots where King's Road had become quagmire. Atop the shivering wood ridge, a scaffold of pine beams began to take shape. The bell tower promised to Wintertown by Speaker Brenna, as symbol of civic unity. Children carried stones from the river to aid masons. Each stone would bear the name of the child's household, to be read aloud at the tower's dedication. Letters arrived from Gulltown praising the Republic's spirited example, and hinting at elective councils in the Vale should the experiment hold. From Old Town came a wary note. Archmaester Valen requested copies of the Northern Charter for scholarly review of atypical sovereignty. Though rumors claimed the conclave felt threatened by free libraries established outside its reach. Even King Gendry sent another missive, frank, almost friendly, inquiring about timber procurement schedules and proposing a joint Northern Crown exploration of long-abandoned storms and crypts rumored to house dragonglass seams. Sansa replied courteously, but committed to nothing. The North had minds of its own, and secrets were best negotiated after harvest. Not all letters bore goodwill. Ravens from Skagos warned of iron sails probing channels under night. One from Deepwood Mott spoke of vanished lumberjacks and bear tracks too large for any known bear. And far to the east, a merchant ship docking at White Harbor carried stories of pale-haired sell-sails in Korth whispering that a Silver Queen had outlived dragons and sought new eggs in the ruins of Valyria. Gossip, perhaps, yet the mere mention chilled Sansa's spine. Twice dragons had upended Westeros. A third at arrival, even rumor, threatened to ignite the fragile order she and her people painstakingly built. One early summer morning she stood atop the half-built bell tower, sticky pitch scent heavy. From that height Winterfell unfurled below like a tapestry. The ring wall patched with fresh mortar. The training yard where rangers drilled shield formations. The godswood canopy shimmering green. Beyond, Wintertown's roofs glistened with dew. Smoke curls rose from bakeries. A distant hammer pounded copper into cooking pots. The melody of ordinary life. Bells clanged suddenly. A discordant peal from the south gatehouse. Alarm. Sansa spun, skirt snapping, and descended ladder 2 rungs at a time. By the time she reached the courtyard, armored riders were clattering through the gate. Mud flecked their cloaks. White falcon sigils marked their breasts. Vale Knights. Their captain dismounted before Jon and Brienne, who had emerged sword at hip. Sansa stepped forward. "Sir, I am Sansa Stark. State your tidings." The knight bowed, breath clouding despite summer warmth. "My lady, Chancellor, Lord Robert Arryn is dead. The Vale Lords convene an election to choose their defender. Lady Sansa's presence is entreated in her blood and wisdom." "Wow!" Shock rippled through the gathering. "Robert? Fragile Robin, gone?" Sansa's heart clenched with memory of a pale boy clinging to her hand above the moon doors, yawning gulf. She forced voice steady. "When did he pass?" 6 days ago, on the mountain road to the Eyrie. Bandit attack. Arrows out of the dusk. Sir Lyn Corbray fell with him. Ser Royce demands justice. The assembled lords believe the North may guide them to a lawful assembly, or to silent swords. Maduris Satin. Joan's brow darkened. The Brotherhood's fingers reach mountains now. Sansa inhaled slowly. The Vale had long eyed her as possible regent, a courtesy unpursued. Now they called her Chancellor. "Tell your lords," she said, "I will come. But not alone, and not under hidden terms. The North's laws travel with me, and so will witnesses." The knight nodded. "I am to escort you. We ride sunset if convenient." "Sunset, then. Winterfell will prepare." Davos protested, of course, citing thin ranger numbers. Brenna argued that harvest oversight required Sansa at the helm. Brienne countered both, noting that a chancellor's absence would show faith in her deputies. Arya simply began sharpening needle. If Sansa left the north, she left with Arya's shadows. They settled on a delegation. Sansa, Brienne, Arya, Samwell, and 4 elected deputies, representing commons, free folk, fisher folk, and inland farmers. Jon would stay as protector, flanked by Davos and Speaker Brenna. The trip would take 9 days by road to Gulltown, then 2 by ship to Snakewood Landing, then ascent to the Erie via Mountain Goat Track, since the main road remained snow-packed in higher passes. Before departure, Sansa met the chamber in emergency session. She read the errand summons, pledged to carry Northern Charter as template only, not mandate. The Vale must choose its own path. The deputies accepted, after brief debate. They passed a motion granting Jon temporary chancellor's seal, to expire upon her return or at autumn equinox, whichever first. Jon looked pained, but bowed. Ghost escorted the party as far as the Shivering Wood, then veered north with Jon. Sansa watched Direwolf fade into pines, a white rift in green, and wondered how often she would envy his freedom before this journey ended. Travel south felt like slipping backwards in time. At Forbes Crossing, old border stones still bore weathered stag and lion, relics from Baratheon-Lannister union scraped almost smooth by wind. Songbirds chirped in hedgerows, fields waved early barley. Village folk paused at wells to gape. The Chancellor in simple travel cloak, no crown nor carriage. Some knelt out of habit. Sansa raised them with gentle words. On the 4th evening, they reached Holdfast Inn near the ruins of the Giant's Lance Spur. There Arya vanished after supper, and did not return till dawn, smelling of pine and steel. At breakfast, she nodded once. Bandit arrows near High Pass. Bodies now feeding crows, and began eating oatcakes without comment. Brienne's look conveyed mixed censure and gratitude. But no reprimand arose. Past Hart's home they climbed into true mountains. Air thinned, nights sharpened. Samwell wheezed yet pressed on, cheeks reddened like forge embers. The gold of sunrise on snow ridges reminded Sansa of stories her mother told of the Eyrie, a castle floating midway to sky. By 7th day, they sighted its white turrets gleaming. A strangely weightless melancholy overcame her. She felt again the hush of the moon door chamber, the rush of wind past her face when Aunt Lysa tumbled into nothing. The lords convened in the high hall, tapestries swirling with falcons and heraldic trumpets. They rose as Sansa entered. She perceived in that collective gesture both courtesy and calculation. Lord Jan Royce, broad as old oak, greeted first. Lines etched deeper around his eyes since she last saw him, but his voice remained a stone. Sir Balon, Swan bowed stiffly. Lady Waynwood pressed token of mourning, a strip of Arryn blue, into Sansa's palm. At the dais stood a plain cedar casket, draped in sky-blue silk. Beside it a girl of 9 summers knelt head bowed. Sansa's breath hitched. Recognition trembled. Little Miranda, Robin's cousin, now orphan and ward. The child lifted tear-swollen eyes. Sansa crossed the distance, knelt, and wrapped arms around her. In that embrace, chatter ceased. Lords beheld not a chancellor, but a stark comforting a frightened girl. And something in the hall's chill seemed to ease. The council assembled within the hour. Royce laid out facts. Robin, 16, journeying from Gates of the Moon to Eyrie for spring feast. Ambushed at dusk by 12 archers, wearing tattered brown cloaks and patches of gray netting. Brotherhood hallmarks. The escort fought valiantly, but Robin and Corbray fell to the first volley. The assailants vanished across Scree, leaving one cloak pinned by arrow, bearing runic F sigil, Flint's rebel mark. Whispers rippled. Brotherhood. Flint's. Northern traitors. Sansa rose. Rogan Flint died months past, executed for war crimes in the north. Someone stokes his ghost to fracture alliances. We chase shadows unless we seek who profits. Swan spoke. Vale commerce with south shrinks, while north wagons roll free. Some here suspect the commons benefits from chaos in passes. Sansa faced him squarely. The commons benefit from stable neighbors. It bleeds grain now to feed riverlanders. We do not sow bandits. Royce interjected. The Vale wishes no quarrel. We seek an election of defender, once a decade tradition. We ask the Chancellor to oversee fairness. Debate stretched into dusk. Some lords eyed Sansa as potential candidate. Others murmured of Waynwood or Royce. Sansa declined outright. I come as arbiter, not aspirant. She proposed open vote by land tally, each house's voice weight by population, not acreage, an echo of northern stones, but translated to Vale custom. Reaction mixed. Progressives intrigued, traditionalists aghast. Arya suggested a simpler approach. Let every knight in Vale gird up. Last one standing leads, drawing nervous laughter. Yet her remark broke tension, and by candle's gutter they forged compromise. A conclave of 30. 15 highborn, 15 small folk delegates elected by village stones, would choose defender by simple majority. The North would supply 9 neutral rangers to guard polls. Samwell would keep count scroll, and the appointment must be ratified by open acclamation on the Erie Sky Bridge. A daring plan, dangerous even, but enough lords consented to put motion forward. Sansa retired to Robin's old chamber, now made ready for her. Moonlight streamed over white marble, illuminating a child's abandoned wooden falcon on the sill. She touched it gently, thinking of innocence lost to arrows. In the quiet, she rehearsed tomorrow's steps. Instruct poets to compose candidate addresses. Arrange kitchens to feed electors. Secure binding wax, still scarce here. Suddenly tasks felt endless, the mountain air too thin. She laid head to pillow, but sleep flitted. Hours later, a soft scrape at balcony. Arya emerged from shadows. Scouts caught 2 sellswards descending goat path. Vale coin and purse. They confessed to waylay for brackens or blackfish, maybe both. Nothing of flint, so someone paid them to wear northern ghosts, Sansa murmured. Arya nodded. I'll bleed the name by dawn. Be careful. Always. Arya vanished. Morning revealed more threads. The sellswards, under Dagger's promise, named a broker in Gulltown Tavern, who named a cloaked woman smelling of orange blossoms who'd sailed west after delivering coin. No direct link, but Edmure's spies later whispered that Lady Cersei's former handmaid now served a half-Mirian shipping guild, notorious for covert assassinations. Sansa tucked the shard of knowledge away. Lion ghosts prowled still. Voting day arrived crisp, banners flapping from every parapet. Villagers trekked mountain trails, exchanging cheeses for bread, gossip for rumor, ... Samwell perched beside table, stacked with river stones dyed sky blue. For yes, gray for abstain. Deputies queued, each depositing stone into cedar chest. Brienne stood sentinel, hand on pommel, yet face calm. Sansa observed from dais, heart thrumming like war drum, though no swords drawn. When the count concluded, Sam's voice rang clear. By majority of 21, bronze-beaded 30 shall choose Lord John Royce as defender of the Vale. A roar erupted, boisterous yet not unanimous. Royce bowed, solemn. Sansa lifted his arm, proclaiming the choice. The hall shook with pounding staves. The Sky Bridge ceremony at dusk was breathtaking. Royce in plain bronze armor stepping onto narrow span above cloud-swirled abyss, flanked by 2 fisherfolk elected by lot. As the crowd chanted, he raised an iron rod, ancient symbol of Falcon's talon, and recited oath. Defender not of blood but of breath. Every breath in Vale my charge. It was new wording Sansa and Sam drafted. Hearing it echoed on winds moistened Sansa's eyes. After feasts and fervor, Royce approached her in quiet alcove. "You delivered peace in high peaks. The veil stands with the north, Chancellor. Come winter or dragon flame." "Hold to that pledge," she replied softly. "For storms gather even as we sup." He nodded gravely. Return trek proved swifter. Mountain roads felt lighter with threat lifted. Yet at Snakewood a raven awaited bearing dire tidings. Iron-born reavers had struck Bear Island in force. 24 ships under banner of a ragged red kraken. Lyanna's cousins repelled initial landing but requested immediate aid. Worse, a Braavosi lone galley, the Blue God's Whisper, had vanished south of Skagos days prior. Davos feared mutiny or capture. Sansa set teeth. "We ride for White Harbor at once, then sail." Brienne assented. Arya already adjusted sword belt. Sam groaned inwardly but mounted. By pushed pace they reached harbor in 4 days. Horses blown but safe. Jon had mustered 3 wolf galleys and 2 captured Kraken ships now refitted. Crews cheered Sansa's sudden arrival. Davos clapped her shoulder. Perfect timing. Tide waits for no mutiny. Within hours, sails bellied. Wind smelled of brine and coming thunder. Sansa stood on quarterdeck of Mormont's Claw beside Lyanna's nephew, young Jorah III, who steered with determined jaw. Torches along quay dwindled into flicker. Turning, she saw Winterfell's northern lights faint on horizon, a green shimmer like silent promise. Night swallowed the fleet, but lanterns on yard arms twinkled in silent formation, a constellation of leaping wolves. She breathed salt, fear, anticipation. The Republic's reach stretched now above mountains and across sea. Each new league tested its sinew. Each challenge forged stronger bone, or risked brittle fracture. She closed eyes, pictured her father's words. "The North remembers," and repeated them like prayer. The North remembers hunger, remembers betrayal, remembers winter. But now it also remembered ballots dropped in cedar chests, grain wagons rolling south, a defender chosen by shepherd stones. That memory could outlast any Kraken tide. Waves slapped hull. Stars wheeled overhead, cold and bright and ancient, indifferent yet abiding. Below deck, rangers sang a new shanty, rue, off-key but earnest. The chorus drifted up to quarterdeck. "Raise the sheaf and bend the bow. No crown upon the breaker's brow. From ice to bloom, the wolf runs free. Voice our shield on wind and sea." Nem seti wet. Sansa leaned into the song. Somewhere ahead, red Kraken banners flapped and Bear Island's fires burned. But here, upon creaking decks sprayed by moonlit salt, she felt hearts beating together, many woven into one. She would stand upon that weave, come storm or flame. She lifted her chin to the wind, and the ship surged northward into darkness that smelled of peril and possibility, carrying with it the breath of a republic newly born yet already unbowed. The voyage continued, horizon and song melding. And behind every verse, behind every creak of mast, the quiet promise endured. The North, clothed not in crowns but in voices, would endure, as long as those voices, in frost and thaw alike, refused to fall silent. K. Kande K. Salt spray battered the hulls, driving cold needles through every seam. As the fleet pressed north, clouds banked low over the restless waters. Lanterns were shielded on most decks, leaving only the ghostly glow of St. Elmo's fire flickering at the mastheads. Night was a living creature, full of creaks, mutters, and the slap of ropes on spars. Every man and woman aboard knew the sea itself could turn foe at a heartbeat's notice. But the spirit was high. Bear Islanders and Northmen, Braavosi mercenaries, and a scattering of freed smallfolk oarsmen, all held steady under Sansa's colors. Word of the Republic's first true test on foreign water had rippled through Winterfell and the harbor, and the North's future seemed to ride with them on the black, heaving tides. Sansa stood on the prow of the Mormont's Claw, cloak plastered to her arms by spray. Lyanna's nephew, young Jorah, gripped the tiller, jaw clenched in concentration as he steered through chop toward the dim silver outline of Bear Island. Arya watched from the shadows at Sansa's back, eyes ever on the horizon, every sense alive to the faintest flicker of movement, a habit no time or peace would ever break in her. Hours before dawn, the lookout's cry sliced the wind. "Fires on the east shore! Kraken banners!" The fleet's drums pounded warning. Signal torches flared and all sails were drawn in tight. Sansa felt the breath seize in her chest. She willed herself calm, reaching for the steely clarity she'd learned to trust in moments of fear. Lyanna, her head bound with a fresh white bandage above one brow, paced the deck below. She pointed into the murk, voice sure and cutting through the gale. "Land there where the pines bend, shingle broad enough to beach at least 3 hulls abreast. The cove's bottom is rock, but the surf runs shallow. Then the Borsti, Davos, grizzled and ever practical, conferred with the Bravosi captains. Boarding parties ready, archers to fore. Light no torches till we touch sand. Their eyes are salt blind, ours sharp as knives." He turned to Sansa, voice pitched low. "We'll not surprise them, but we can strike where they least expect. Cut their ships loose from the inside and drive them into the surf." The ships grounded with a shudder, hulls scraping stone. Ramps dropped, splashing men and women into ankle-deep surf, the crash of waves drowned by shouted orders. Northmen surged up the shore, shields locked, spears bristling. Sansa remained aboard but close to the ramp, eyes fixed on the flicker of distant flame behind the dunes. Bear Islanders, wild with vengeance, led the first rush. Arya vanished into darkness, a shadow among the rocks. She reappeared only hours later with blood on her sleeve and 2 battered survivors in tow. Found them trying to torch a goat pen. Would have roasted the kids alive if they'd had their way. By dawn, the Northmen held the cove. Dead Ironborn littered the stones, and smoke from 2 burning longships drifted out to sea. Lyanna herself led the charge that drove the last reavers into the shallows. She returned limping and grinning, blood streaming from a shallow cut on her arm. "That'll teach them to raid when the wolf howls. We lost 3 and a dozen wounded. They lost 20 and their pride." Sansa left the deck and walked through the battered line of survivors. Offering a hand to each, no speech, only the press of palm to palm, a nod. Many stared at her with a mixture of awe and disbelief. She thought, this is the price. No crown, no scepter, but the weight of every face turned toward you when blood is on the sand. Later that morning, as the wounded were tended, and Bear Island's clan mothers prepared hot broth in battered iron cauldrons, Sansa gathered her council on the pebble-strewn shore. The day was thin and cold, the sky broken into scudding blue and steel. Davos bent over a wet chart. The main Kraken force struck further north. Small boats, mostly, probing for weaknesses in the cliffs. The fleet scattered, but there's no sign they'll mass for another assault soon. Nendertosta. Brienne, standing guard, added, "Their captain was not among the dead. Some islanders claim he fled in the first boat, a red beard with a broken jaw." Arya's eyes narrowed. "Hell'll surface again. They always do. But he'll find the north watching." Samwell, sleep-starved and ink-stained, had come up from the Mormon's Claw with a sheaf of damp paper. Letters from White Harbor. "The Chamber's messenger pigeons finally found us. Grain is landing in Maidenpool. The Riverlands send word of a new league, councils, not lords, drafting their own harvest law." His face lit with something like childish joy, despite the blood and chaos around them. "The word is spreading. Some villages in the west even whisper of commons meetings by moonlight." Lyanna snorted. "Let them whisper. It's when they shout we'll know we've won." Sansa stood silent for a long moment, then looked out over the breaking surf. "No walls but winters hold us now. The North is not just a land. It's a way of being. If we hold true to that, our neighbors will learn, or else founder in their own storms." Metsuntawanen. Days passed on Bear Island as the fleet rebuilt. Driftwood and wrecked Kraken hulls became barricades. Wounds were stitched, mead shared, tales retold. Sansa walked the island, listening to clan mothers and fishermen, wildlings and rangers, their grievances and their plans. Each voice became part of her tally, the slow census by which the Republic grew. One story, one promise at a time. On the 3rd evening, as the wind slackened and the aurora shimmered faintly overhead, Sansa called a moot on the high ground above the bay. 100 voices ring the fire. Islanders, free folk, ranger captains, Brienne, Arya, Sam, and even the old Braavosi steersman, who claimed he'd once seen dragons rise in the Far East. Sansa spoke without notes, cloak hood thrown back, torch in hand. You have shed blood for your island, for your families, for the idea that no one must kneel to save what they love. The North endures not because of banners, but because we endure each other. The Kraken will come again. Perhaps others will, too. Dragons, lions, men who dream of thrones. But this is the truth we hold. We stand for ourselves together, and no crown, no lord, no ghost can take that from us. Ooh. A silence, then a deep, rough cheer. The sort born in hard lives and hard victories. Arya grinned at her sister. Almost sounded like a queen there. Sansa replied, quiet but fierce. A queen sits above. A chancellor stands among. I'd rather freeze with you than rule alone. Brienne raised her cup in salute. The fire burned long into the night. The fleet returned in triumph to White Harbor. News of their stand preceded them, carried on the tongues of fishermen and traders. The Chamber of Commons convened an emergency session, not to debate, but to witness. Rangers and sailors, Bear Islanders and wildlings, stood before the assembly as Samwell read the names of the lost, and each name was echoed by a voice in the crowd. Speaker Brenna hammered the assembly to silence. The North fought not for gold, nor for vengeance, but for the right of all folk to sleep beneath their own roof. Unburnt, unbowed. Let that be law. Daenerys Soens. Petitions flooded the floor. For ranger patrols in the mountain passes, for watchfires in every port, for expansion of the coastal fleet. The deputies voted stone by stone, line by line. New laws were inked, old ones amended. The commons had tasted its power, and liked it. Jon, returned from Winterfell, stood in the back with Ghost at his heel, watching Sansa as she presided. When the session broke, he caught her arm as she stepped from the dais. Father would have said the hard part was over, now that peace is bought. Sansa smiled tiredly. Father would have known better. Jon's voice was gentle. You built something new. It will hold. Sansa squeezed his hand. If enough hands keep holding. That spring and summer, the North was restless, forging its future. Ranger patrols swept through the hills and forests, rooting out the last Brotherhood agents. The Ironborn, battered and humiliated, raided no more that season. Their new lord sent a ship under a flag of truce to treat for the return of prisoners and lost ships, offering oaths, meaningless perhaps, but necessary. Braavosi traders, seeing profit, established a permanent outpost at White Harbor, bringing coin and foreign news. In Wintertown, the bell tower rose stone by stone. Children gathered each evening to watch the stonemasons carve the household names into the foundation. The Riverlands followed suit. At Maidenpool and Harrenhal, new leagues formed, modeled on the Northern Charter. Envoys rode north, south, and west to consult, to borrow, to argue. At every meeting, the North's delegation, never more than 3, read aloud the words Sansa had written by candlelight in her father's library. No crown upon the breaker's brow. Each voice is a stone. The wall stands because of all its stones. One day in late summer, a Vale merchant arrived with news that the Lords Declarant had reaffirmed the Defender's Charter, and a village in the Mountains of the Moon had elected its first council of freeholders. Another raven from the Reach, uncertain and flowery, invited an observer from the most esteemed northern experiment to attend a moot at Old Town. Sansa, smiling at the irony, dispatched Samwell. Thou respect your citadel links, she told him, and your honest nose for mendacity. Yet as the North blossomed, so too did threats. Spies from King's Landing, now led by Gendry and his Dornish queen, passed through Moat Cailin in merchant's garb. In the east, a sail ship brought word of 3 dragons glimpsed over the smoking sea, and a silver-haired woman with eyes like cold fire speaking in tongues. Whispers of the Golden Company seeking new sponsors reached the White Knife. Sansa received each report in her solar, weighed it, and met with her council. Brienne, John, Davos, Lyanna, Arya, and Speaker Brenna. We cannot fight every shadow, she reminded them. Let us build what we can touch, hold, and count. The chamber agreed. Laws for land, for sea, for grain, for birthright. New schools, new coin, stamped with the wolf and sheep. Every coin was recorded. None went to the Chancellor's purse, and Sam kept the ledgers open for any to read. Arya, restless, spent much of her time abroad, hunting rumors and dangers, but sometimes she returned, eyes sparkling. The world is watching, Sansa. Some hope we fail. Some pray we thrive. None know what comes next. Nor do we, Sansa replied. But we'll choose, not kneel. Autumn arrived sooner than anyone expected, carried on the backs of wild geese and the first highland frosts. The harvest proved generous. Grain stores filled, and the chamber voted to send twice the promised wagons south, binding riverlands and north together, in trust not seen in 100 years. At the bell tower's dedication, Sansa stood beside children and elders alike. She watched as each household stone was placed in the wall. The name called out, the bell rung once. Then she climbed the final ladder, placed her own stone at the apex, and gazed out across Winterfell, Wintertown, the far ridges already glazed with rime. She looked down at the faces upturned in expectation, not to a queen, but to a keeper of promises. My father said the North remembers, Sansa began, her voice ringing clear. He was right. The North remembers the hard winters, the hungry times, the nights when hope was no more than a candle. But today, we remember something new. We remember what it means to build. Not for crowns, but for our children and their children after them. We build together, and no storm, no sword, no crown can tear that down, not so long as we remember ourselves. Doom? Bells pealed, voices cheered, and as dusk descended, the tower's shadow swept across the roofs, long and strong, marking the new heart of a land remade. Through winter, threats came and went. One day, a rider arrived with the standard of the Golden Company, seeking audience. Sansa listened, nodded, then politely turned them away. No sellswords, she said, only citizens. Another night, the sky lit with green fire, and fishermen brought a tale of dragon shapes wheeling far above the sea. Sansa gathered the chamber, discussed contingency plans, shelters, evacuation routes, stores, but counseled patience. Dragons may come, so might famine, flood, or civil war. But we will meet each as we met the Kraken, together. The chamber set aside days for debates, for trade, for games and stories. Each season they tallied the votes, never once by sword, always by stone. In spring, Lyanna proposed a ranger moot, a day for every household to see the patrols drill. To join them, if able. Let the people see the shield they forged, she said. Sansa agreed. Every child who marched that day received a polished pebble as keepsake, a promise that they too, in time, would have their voice. Year turned. The Republic's second spring dawned with the godswood white with blossom, and the night air full of birdsong. The North was no paradise. Hunger still prowled, old grudges flared, storms battered ships from time to time. But the wolves howled in chorus now, not in isolation, and each voice made the others stronger. On the 3rd anniversary of the founding, Sansa stood once more on the bell tower, the North's valleys and hills rolling before her, the air sweet and chill. Jon stood at her side. Brienne, Lyanna, Arya, Sam, and Speaker Brenna below, their faces upturned to hers. She looked out, heart swelling. No crown upon her brow, no sword in her hand. Only the memory of blood and hope, the chorus of the North at her back, and the knowledge that what they had made was stronger than any castle, older than any crown. Let every voice be heard, she called, her words ringing down into the still air. Let every stone be counted. Let the North endure. The bells rang out, and the song of the Republic rose, unbroken, undaunted, and ever new, into the bright cloudless sky. Ha! The thaw of the 3rd spring was a slow unfurling, as if the land itself hesitated to trust the promise of sun. First, drifts in the godswood receded and green-black moss crept from beneath the heart tree's roots. Then, as if on cue, the rivers shed their ice overnight. Trout flickered through glassy shallows, and brown geese arrowed north, their calls echoing over Wintertown's smoky rooftops. The menders and masons labored at their endless patchwork. Roofs and ramparts, new storehouses, the cobbled road winding to White Harbor, all bustling with the hopeful clamor of rebuilding. The people of the North had become used to work and to waiting, to tallying not only what was lost, but what might be made from loss. In the Chamber of Commons, the spring session convened with unprecedented urgency. Rumors had reached even most stubbornly isolated villages. Tales of unrest in the south, of new fires along the coast, and of strangers drifting in overland from east and west. Sansa, presiding in her plain gray wool, called the meeting to order. The Commons benches now held deputies from nearly every recognized settlement, tanners from Barrowton, shipwrights from Skagos, the chieftain of a wildling clan who'd become the first free folk ever elected to the seat. At the table's end, Samuel's ledger sprawled open, each neat row of figures and annotations, marking not just taxes and trade, but the rhythm of survival. First matter, Speaker Brenna announced, voice rough as ever, the Ironborn offer treaty and ransom. 4 ships lost, 7 prisoners they wish returned. They propose grain and salt pork in trade, and pledge no more reaving for a year and a day. Noun. A murmur, but no outrage. The memory of Bear Island's fires and the battered wolf fleet was fresh, but so too was the knowledge that every enemy made new allies elsewhere. Sansa weighed the offer, then nodded to Jon, who stood silent as ever in the shadows behind the deputies. "We are not children," she said. "No war ends all wars. Let them send their grain and pork, but the prisoners must pledge never to take arms against the North or its friends. If they do, we answer not with ransom, but with rope." Agreed. Stone tokens dropped. Overwhelming approval. Arya, returned from the coast with a face wind-burned and eyes bright, smirked at the practical cruelty of the arrangement. Sansa caught her gaze and gave a subtle nod. No illusions, no mercy for old ghosts. Only the terms of survival, made and enforced by the living. The session continued. Reports from the new Ranger Corps, now drilled and proud in dark leathers stitched with wolf and pine. A merchant's petition for passage along the White Knife, bringing northern furs to Bravos and Pentos in exchange for dyes and ink. And a delegation of wildlings requesting that the old keeps beyond the wall be reopened and administered by free folk, not lords. "Let the North's promise reach where no lord's banner ever flew," Sansa declared. "Let every child born north of the wall know they have a token to claim, a stone to cast, a place at our table." She saw, as she spoke, the pride ignite in the wildling chieftain's weathered face. A small miracle, but a miracle all the same. After, as the deputies filed out into the square, Sansa lingered at the window, hands braced on the cold stone. Through the glass she watched as Brenna and Sam debated over the best use of a new coinage, as Arya vanished down the lane with a half-laughing threat to spar the next man who called her "lady," as children darted around the feet of Jon's rangers, spinning pebbles and singing a nonsense rhyme that ended, always, with a bell's deep peal. She thought of her father, of every father and mother buried in ice and snow, and wondered if any of them had imagined a world in which power could be made and kept like this, with stones and words and unbroken oaths. That summer, the first fair in the history of the Republic was held at Wintertown. Stalls lined the muddy lanes, bright with cloth banners, bearing sigils both old and new. The free folk brewed sour mead. The Manderleys offered oysters and river crabs. Smiths from Last Hearth and Flint's Finger displayed tools and knives stamped with the wolf and sheaf. Children of all birth ran wild through the crowds. Stark and Glover, Umber and Hornwood, wildling and orphan from the wars, all claimed by the Commons. Sansa walked the rows in the company of Arya and Brienne. Here, a contest of archers from every village. Old men with longbows, laughing girls with new-made yew. There, a tent where storytellers competed for the largest crowd, and the audience voted not with applause, but with the tossing of colored stones. Samuel managed a booth where elders and small folk might sign the new book of citizens. The queue stretched long, with every signer earning a polished pebble. A symbol that would one day, he explained, entitle their kin to inherit land or stand for any seat in the chamber. No bloodlines, no old names, he said, beaming at the wildling grandmother who pressed her thumb into the register. Only this: you live here, you serve here, you belong. At dusk, as the sky streaked with red and violet, a hush fell over the main square. Sansa climbed a hastily built dais and called for the bell to be rung. Its note shivered through the warm air. Every conversation paused, every head turned. My mother taught me that a house was built stone by stone, she began, voice steady. This republic is built not just with stone, but with the hands and hearts of every soul here. We gather to remember who we were, but more, to see what we are becoming. For the first time in memory, no one here bows. You stand as equals, because you have chosen each other. No thunderous ovation followed, just a long, warm silence, as if the whole town inhaled at once, holding the moment between old ways and new out. Arya stepped beside her as the crowd scattered, a smile twitching in the corner of her mouth. They'll talk about this night 100 years from now, you know. They'll talk about you more, Sansa replied. The Night Wolf, as they call you in the south. Arya's laughter was low. Let them. I like the Norse name better. Arya of the Many Stones. The fair lingered for 3 days, then faded like a dream. But after, the roads hummed with movement. New traders, old enemies now turned partners. Bands of children traveling with token in hand to claim their place in the future. The chamber's sessions grew longer, the public squares more crowded. Trouble was never far. That autumn, a new shadow touched the north. A letter from the east, stamped with a dragon and written in Valyrian. Sam read it twice before translating, then 3 more times for Sansa in private. It was as she had feared. Daenerys Stormborn, queen in exile, had returned to the ruins of Valyria. 3 dragons circled her campfires, and emissaries from the free cities clustered around her banners, each bringing offers of alliance and tribute. I never believed she would die, Sansa said, folding the letter. Or that fire could be so patient. Jon and Brienne counseled caution. Arya restlessness. Samwell, haunted by old fears, suggested a moot. If the dragons cross the narrow sea, we will need every Alieli, south and west, and even the Ironborn. The chamber's next session was fraught, but not panicked. Deputies from the coast argued for new scorpions, for towers rebuilt along every bay. Inland farmers fretted about grain stores and old tales of dragonfire consuming fields. The free folk offered to send runners north, to the watchers on the wall, in case the dragons tested the sky. Sansa listened, head bowed, then spoke softly. We have faced dragons before. We know what burns and what endures. We will not bend to fire or crown. If Daenerys comes, let her find not a kingdom, but a people, united, proud, and unwilling to kneel. Our greatest shield is not walls or arrows, but the knowledge that here, no one stands alone. Nah. Winter returned hard that year. The snows piled up to the bell tower's eaves. The white knife froze so thick that wagons rolled atop it like a second road. But the grain stores, painstakingly hoarded, audited by Sam's endless tally, held. Hunger was known, but never desperate. The chamber's soup kitchens ran day and night. Children born in the storm were wrapped in furs sewn by both wildling and townsmen. It was in those nights, when the wind shrieked and even the gods would seem to groan, that Sansa walked the halls and remembered what had been won and what could still be lost. Jon and Brienne drilled the rangers by torchlight. Arya vanished into the wild for weeks, returning silent and smiling with fresh scars. Sam wrote letters, and Speaker Brenna, old, slow, but iron-willed, presided over every morning's roll call. The people endured. With each new challenge, the memory of crowns grew fainter, replaced by the rough comfort of tokens in the pocket, a name in the ledger, a voice on the floor. And then the spring thaw again. Swifter, sharper, as if the land itself was impatient to shake off the weight of ice. The first merchant ships from Braavos arrived with cloth and cheese and rumors. Daenerys had taken Pentos. The free cities were fracturing, each prince and magister scrambling to outbid the others for her favor or protection. Sansa convened the chamber in an emergency night session. The deputies debated and voted whether to send envoys to fortify the coasts, to call on the southern alliances inked so laboriously in better days. In the end, as dawn streaked the sky, it was Arya who stood and said, "We have always survived. We did not survive by hiding, but by meeting each storm as it came." The Republic's response was neither war nor surrender. Instead, they dispatched a modest embassy to Pentos, with Samwell as lead, to carry not tribute, but the charter, translated into the careful High Valyrian of the East. It was both shield and olive branch, a testament to what the North had become. If Daenerys sought subjects, she would find instead partners, or failing that, defiance. Years spun onward, as years must. There were battles still, betrayals and storms, but each was faced not by a single Stark, nor by lords alone, but by the commons, by the wildlings of the far north, the rangers of the Wolf's Wood, the shipwrights of White Harbor, and the farmers of the green fields. Each session of the chamber was louder, more raucous, and sometimes the benches shook with laughter, as often as with anger. Old enemies became allies. Grudges grew dull. Sansa grew older, her hair streaked with silver, her eyes ever sharper. She walked the bell tower's winding stair every new moon, and from its top she saw not only the walls of Winterfell, but the scattered lights of villages and camps and farmsteads, each one a stone in the unbroken wall of her people's making. One winter's eve, as the snow drove in hard and the wind rattled the high glass, Arya returned, older, leaner, but smiling still. "I found the edge of the world, Sansa," she said, laughing. "But it was only more sea, and another story to tell." Sansa drew her sister close and said, "Then come tell it to the commons, for it's stories that make the stones hold fast." And so they endured, year after year. The North did not become a utopia. It remained cold and proud, and sometimes cruel. But it was theirs. All of it, in every sense the word could mean. On the Republic's 10th spring, as the bells rang out and the people gathered for the fair, Sansa stood before them and saw a sea of faces, wildling, noble, fisher, smith, orphan, merchant, and ranger. She raised her hand for silence, and as the hush fell, she spoke the words that had outlasted every threat, every storm. "We are not what we were, nor yet what we will become. But so long as each of you casts your stone, speaks your truth, and stands beside your neighbor, the North will endure. Not as a kingdom, nor as a memory, but as a promise kept, season after season, stone after stone." Memdawar. And as the crowd roared, and the bells rang, and the spring wind shivered over the ramparts, Sansa Stark, once a pawn, once a queen, now and always the chancellor of her people, knew she had built something that no crown, no dragon, no death could take away. The North stood. The Republic held. And all across the snows, the voices of the people rose together, strong enough to outsing the wolves and the wind. Baika. Year followed year, as the rhythm of the land cycled from thaw to bloom, from harvest to frost, and then to sleep and return again. The North breathed, not in the measured tread of armies or the fevered pageantry of courts, but in the pulse of rivers, the sweep of rangers through the wild, and the hum of voices in the chamber as stone tokens passed from hand to hand, and the work of governance carried on through storm, famine, and long peace alike. As the Republic aged, the lines on Sansa's face grew deeper, silver threading through her auburn hair. She wore her years as she wore her responsibilities, lightly in the day, heavily in the small hours when the keep was silent, and even the bells seemed hesitant to sound. The snow was slower to melt each spring, and sometimes the fog hung low on the moors for days, but she took comfort in these slow certainties. The North was patient, and so was she. In the 10th autumn of the Republic, the commons gathered for what had come to be called the Great Reckoning, a day when every hold, village, clan, and camp sent their tallied stones to Winterfell, and the chamber met for a week of open session. Deputies slept 3 to a pallet, and the city's markets overflowed with goods and gossip, from every quarter of the north. On the eve of the first session, Sansa stood with Samwell, now balder and broader, but still scribbling furiously, as he checked the ledgers for the 7th time that day. The open book glowed in the firelight, each entry a mark of trust. Winter grain accounted for, taxes on Braavosi wine, the purchase of timber from the wildling camps for new boats along the shivering sea. Sam wiped his brow and smiled. When we first wrote these ledgers, I had to carry the keys in my sleeve, because there were men who would have burned them for spite. Now, the ledgers themselves are locked only to the ink until they dry. Trust, Sansa said, is the hardest coin, harder even than gold, but it spends longer. He looked at her over the rim of his glasses. The South asks for a new treaty. Gendry's boy sits the throne now, and the maesters whisper of reforms. Sansa nodded, neither pleased nor troubled. Send word that we'll host the treaty council at Moat Cailin in the spring, after the flood. If the South wishes to learn, let them walk the bog, like any guest. Nye. Sam grinned, and perhaps slip and fall as any guest. The chamber met in the great hall, now ringed with banners, representing not just old houses but new towns and leagues. Plainsfolk of the Mander, lake people of the Long Lake, the Bear Coast Confederacy, the Sisterhood from Skagos, and half a dozen wildling tribes, whose names had become as familiar as those of the great keeps. Speaker Brenna, older still but no less fierce, brought the assembly to order with a single peal of the bell. The deputies presented their stones, white for assent, black for dissent, blue for proposal, red for warning. No vote passed without debate, and more than one session ended in laughter as rivals made peace over a cask of Manderley beer, or a wager of who could remember the oldest snow. The business of the realm was not always grand. This year, most debate centered on the question of river tariffs, the best routes for winter wagons, and how to distribute Braavosi coin so that the poorest hamlets could have their own bells and healers. Yet always at the end of each session, the assembly stood together and recited the vow that had become the Republic's heartbeat. I am the stone, you are the wall. I am the voice, you are the call. None stand above, and none below. We shape our fate in frost and snow. Nenbantine. The world beyond the neck grew more turbulent as the years passed. The South's kings changed, some in beds, some by blade. Daenerys' dragons never came. Her storm spent itself over the ruins of old Volantis, and the free cities broke into 100 quarrelsome fiefs. The Ironborn became traitors, then pirates, then traitors again. The Vale raised a new defender every 7 years by stone and sword. The Riverlands healed, then split, then healed again. Through it all, the North watched and remembered, and quietly endured. Sansa kept her lines of ink open, her rangers ready, her ears to the bells and the wind. Arya became a legend, passing unseen along the borders, a rumor, a warning, a promise. Brienne led the rangers into her old age, her hair as white as new snow, her eyes bright as ever. Sam became Maester of Winterfell and of the North in all but name, his books read from Skagos to the Gift. In the 21st year of the Republic, as Sansa entered her 5th decade, a fresh challenge rose, not from dragon or reaver, but from within. Famine came early, a blight spreading across the barley fields and the rye, and grain stores shrank faster than Sam's ledgers could record. Villages sent ravens and runners. Help us. The chamber called an emergency moot. For 3 days and nights the deputies argued. Some begged to levy the old lords for their hidden stores. Some called for Braavosi loans, others to ration and hope for snowmelt. Sansa listened, hands folded, as every stone was cast, until a voice rose from the back, strong and sure, belonging to a young woman whose mother had been the first wildling in the chamber. We do not survive by hoarding or by old fear. We share or we die. We break bread or we break. A long silence, broken only by the shiver of the wind. Then, one by one, the deputies stood and added their voice to hers. The grain stores were opened, and the soup kitchens ran night and day. The rangers hunted game, the wildlings taught the valley folk how to smoke and dry roots. There was hunger, but never starvation. The blight passed, and in its wake the Republic stood stronger. At the next fair, Sansa presented the wildling deputy with a silver token shaped like a snowflake, forged in the keep's own smithy. "This is the North," she said, "and every flake makes the storm." Time's current quickened. Sam died at 81, asleep among his books, with children and grandchildren gathered in the solar. Arya vanished for a year, then returned with scars from the sunset sea, and a new tale for every fire. Brienne's old sword was retired, set above the chamber door, and her last lesson to the Rangers was simple: no shield endures unless it shields the next. Sansa's days became quieter. She walked the walls at sunrise, often with Jon, whose own hair had gone to frost, and whose steps grew slower, but whose smile never faded. Ghost ranged before them, muzzle white, eyes wise and tired. In her old age, Sansa relinquished the chancellorship. The chamber elected a new leader. Her apprentice, a stonemason's son from White Harbor, who could recite every clause of the charter from memory. Sansa gave him her seal, and with it the only words she thought he needed: "Listen well. Rule as little as you must." She took up residence in her mother's old chambers, now bright with the tapestries of every village, stitched with stories of grain and frost and song. On the 40th year of the Republic, Winterfell erupted in celebration. The bells rang for a full hour. The feast table stretched the length of the bailey, and every household sent a token, stone or shell or bead, to be set in the foundation of a new hall dedicated to the commons. Jon and Arya, Brienne's kin, the children of Samwell, and wildling and rangers from every reach gathered for the dedication. Sansa, hair all silver now, climbed the dais for the last time. She stood with her hands on the stones and looked over the crowd, thousands strong, and saw not only her people, but her life, each struggle, each hope, each voice. She spoke, her words carrying across the yard and into every open window. Once, the North was a kingdom of crowns and swords. Once we knelt and feared, and waited for others to decide our fate. But now, in this hall and every home, we are makers of our own world. Each voice, each stone, each hand. The promise we forged together will not break, so long as you remember to listen, to speak, to stand. The crowd roared, and Arya grinned at her from the front row, and Jon's hand closed around hers. For a moment she felt young again, a girl in the Godswood, dreaming of songs and heroes. Years later, after her death, they set Sansa's ashes beneath the heart tree, mingled with earth and with 1,000 pebbles brought from every corner of the North. The bells tolled, slow and deep, for a day and a night. No queen's crown marked her memory, but the chamber stood in silence as a wildling deputy placed a single polished stone atop the mound, and said the words that every child now learned before their 10th winter. "We are the stones, we are the wall, we are the voice, and we are the call." The North endured, not in spite of the world, but because it remembered itself. The Republic held, not as a beacon shining alone, but as a hearth around which every soul, noble or wild, ranger or smith, old and new, might find warmth and voice and hope that lasted longer than any crown. And above the snows, beneath the stars, in the hush that followed each season's turning, the North was heard, in every voice, in every stone, in every child's laughter carried on the wind. K. Spring again. Snow clung only in the north-facing hollows now, and even in the coldest shadows of the walls, new shoots thrust upward, green as hope. The air in Winterfell was heavy with the sense of damp earth, wood smoke, and the sweet tang of fermenting berry wine. In every yard and paddock, life pulsed. Sheep lambed, and hens squabbled over new grass. The smithy's fires belched, and the bell in the commons hall tolled dawn. The North was at peace, or as close to it as a land of wolves and storms could ever be. But it was a peace made not from forgetting, nor enforced by fear, but carefully woven of memory, work, and the small, stubborn mercies that every household had learned to share. Sansa's name no longer resounded in the daily work of government, but her influence lingered like a gentle hand on every door. The apprentices who swept the steps of the bell tower remembered stories she'd told them. Stories of the long night and of a time before the stones of the Great Wall had been laid, when people gathered around the fire because they had only each other. In the Commons Hall, her portrait hung beside those of Brenna Tallheart, Brienne of Tarth, Samwell Tarly, Jon Snow, and Arya Stark, painted with soft, honest strokes, a woman in plain wool, lips half-smiling, eyes knowing, hair streaked with frost. Outside the chamber, the children of Wintertown played a game called Moot, casting pebbles in the gutters, counting off votes in rough rhyme, awarding victory not to the loudest, but to whoever convinced the most others to follow. Their laughter, the shouts and whistles and the clatter of pebbles, rang through the alleys as clear as birdsong. Within the chamber, the business of the North went on. New Speaker Thane, the stonemason's son, presided with gentle humor, his voice easy and carrying. He was in his 3rd year of service, and his hands bore the calluses of honest labor. His counsel was drawn from all walks, fishers from Skagos, wildlings from the Gift, the smith's daughter from Barroton, the twins from the White Knife Marshes. Debates could last hours, even days, but no voice was left unheard, and no grievance too small to be given a hearing. That spring, the talk was of expansion. The North's population had grown, swelled by free folk from beyond the wall, and a slow trickle of Southerners, refugees from the endless, pointless squabbles of the Green Lands, seeking a place where a promise and a pebble meant more than a bloodline. Rangers patrolled the King's Road, not as wardens, but as guides and mediators. The children of wildlings and Northmen were schooled together in stone halls where lessons were given in trade, governance, swordwork, and song. In White Harbor, the Bravosi enclave bustled with trade, and in Maidenpool, the first Southern League to model itself on the Northern Commons, held its inaugural session, sending a cask of honeyed wine north in thanks. But peace and plenty brought their own tests. That summer, disease came up from the south, a fever, swift and brutal. The first cases appeared among traders at White Harbor, and within days the word was everywhere. Instead of panic, the chamber responded as it had trained itself for a generation. Crier bells were rung, a curfew was set, and every healer and maester sent for. The sick were tended in special wards, food was distributed house to house, and Sansa's own herbal journals, copied and recopied, were brought out from the great library and consulted by every healer. John, now old and half lame from a ranger's fall but ever the sentinel, rode from town to town, ensuring that no house was left hungry or helpless. Arya, lean and gray-haired but sharp as ever, slipped through the worst-hit villages, bringing hope and stern counsel, reminding folk not to fear but to listen, to share, to endure. Speaker Thane and his council worked day and night. Each household that recovered sent a pebble to the bell tower, where they were counted and displayed. White for health, blue for loss, green for gratitude. The tally became a visible sign of struggle and recovery. In the end, the fever burned itself out before the first snows, and when the bells rang to announce the last patient's healing, the people of the North gathered in the square and gave thanks, not to gods nor to lords, but to each other. In that, they felt Sansa's hand most clearly, as if she had never truly left. Autumn returned with rain and early wind. The chamber turned to preparations for winter. Grain tallied, cellars stocked, roots cleared, and every village sent its vote for the next round of works to be undertaken. New bridges, school roofs, repairs to the old snow road along the stony shore. The young, ambitious, and restless found work as apprentices, sailors, and messengers. The old taught and told stories and sat in the warmth of shared halls. For the first time, a Southern-born woman was elected to the council, a daughter of Old Town, once a refugee, now a respected healer. Her speech to the Commons echoed in every corner of the hall. "You took me in as a stranger, and I am a stranger no longer. My vote is cast with yours. My heart is Northern now." There was applause, and more than one tear. That winter, a new tale made its way through every inn and fireside of the stone bell, now hung in the center of the Commons Hall, rung once for each decision, once for every child born, and once for every passing, so that all would remember they were part of a story larger than anyone. Over the next decade, the shape of the North shifted again. The wildlings built new villages at the edge of the wood, their children learning to read and farm alongside those of the Stark bannermen. The first free folk became Speaker of the Chamber, his accent strange and his wit sharp. Maesterly apprentices were drawn from the children of fishers and wildlings alike, and even the Ironborn sent their daughters to learn at the northern schools. On the day the first ship built at Skagos sailed into White Harbor, her hull painted with both kraken and wolf, the commons declared a new festival, Seastone Day, and bells were rung in every tower from Deepwood Motte to the Gift. A wild, jubilant celebration followed, with fish stews and sweet wine, and the children ran through the streets with ribbons of blue and green. Sansa's portrait watched it all, a faint smile at the edge of her lips. As the North flourished, so too did its influence. More southern leagues adopted the pebble and stone system, sending envoys north to study the laws and customs of the commons. Some scoffed, old lords clinging to their birthrights and their swords, but others saw the strength that grew in the lands of winter, not just in arms but in unity, adaptability, in a people who weathered each trial with stubborn grace. When, in the 30th year of the Republic, a southern king arrived at Moat Cailin for a council, bringing no banners, only his counselors and a chest of gold for trade, he was greeted not with bows, but with a welcome meal and an open seat at the chamber. It was the custom now. Every guest, no matter how high or low, must break bread with the folk of the town before any bargain could be struck. The southern king listened to the debates, watched the votes cast in stone and voice, and later, at the fireside, confessed to Speaker Thane, "I have sat in a dozen gilded halls, but never have I seen a people so fierce in their belonging, so content in their labor. I thought I had come north to teach. Perhaps it is the south that must learn." Word of this spread south and east, and more envoys came, some to learn, some to sow mischief. The North welcomed them all, trusted in its customs, and watched them closely. The years passed as they must. Arya died in her sleep, an old woman whose legend had grown greater than her living self. Jon passed quietly, his hand in the fur of Ghost's last pup, buried beside the godswood. Speaker Thane stepped down, replaced by a girl born to a wildling mother and a farmer's son from the Rills. Her first act was to propose that every new speaker should visit each town and hold moot in every valley before taking the bell. Old wounds faded. New names joined the ledgers. Children from the Reach, the Vale, the Islands, even the free cities. The North became a tapestry, wider, richer, more tangled than ever before. And through every change, the commons remained. Laws changed, the language of the charters shifted as new people brought new words, but the heart of the system endured. A stone, a voice, a promise that every soul counted. In the last decade of Sansa's century, as Winterfell's towers leaned into the sky with the memory of countless storms, a great-grandchild of the Starks, who had never known crowns nor kings, sat before her portrait in the Commons Hall and recited, for the 1000th time, the vow that had bound the North through generations. "I am the stone, you are the wall. I am the voice, you are the call. None stand above, and none below. We shape our fate in frost and snow." Ian? Bells rang. Children cast pebbles, and the halls were filled with laughter, and the North endured. Through ice and thaw, through famine and feast, through peace and peril, the Republic stood. It stood not because it was perfect, or unchallenged, or unchanging, but because it was alive, a living thing, growing, remembering, remaking itself with every new season, every newborn cry, every pebble and every palm. And so it would remain, long after the last memory of crowns had faded, as long as a single voice could rise above the wind, as long as a single stone could strike against the bell, as long as the North remembered itself, not as it had been, but as it chose to become. K. Spring's return was no longer counted by banners or tolling bells alone, but by the swelling of rivers, the ripple of migratory flocks over the godswood, and the laughter of children leaping barefoot through shallow pools in Wintertown's alleys. 50 years and more since the North's first free vote. Its people had learned to measure time not only by hardship or triumph, but by the steady continuity of ordinary days. Bread rising, water drawn, firewood split, disputes settled by open council, and the clang of the commons' bell. No king's face graced the coin, and in the ledger of births and deaths, ancestry no longer determined worth. Generations had grown up never kneeling, never fearing the thunder of lordly hooves at their door. The memory of old tyrannies became legend, then cautionary tale. Children recited the Republic's oath before their lessons, and when the stone tokens were cast, young and old alike waited with equal anticipation for the speaker's gavel, which was carved from a branch of the heart tree and polished by a century of use. The Commons Hall was now a sprawling complex of stone and timber, its wings abuzz from dawn till dusk with every craft and calling. Scribes copying laws in a dozen tongues, healers training apprentices from both sides of the wall, wildlings and townsfolk bargaining for timber or wall. Itinerant singers testing new verses for the stone bell. Each mural, each banner, each statue was made not to commemorate victories of war, but the fragile, stubborn peace wrought from every heart that cast a pebble in trust. In the early days of a long, gentle spring, two old friends met beneath the branches of the godswood, as they did each year. It was an ancient ritual, begun in the final decade of Sansa's life, and continued after her death by those who remembered her best. Today, the meeting was between Sir Lan Snow, the eldest son of a free folk matriarch, and Willa Manderly, White Harbor's senior shipwright and the first woman in her family to hold the city seat in the Commons. Both were well past their prime, hair gone to white or steel, bones stiffening as the wind lost its bite. They walked beneath the red leaves, sharing a flask of cherry cordial and stories, some true, some polished in the retelling. The heart tree towered above, its face softened by moss and time. At its roots, Sansa's resting place was marked by a simple plaque. Here lies Sansa Stark, who taught the North to choose itself. Do you remember the winter the fever swept the coast? Willa asked, leaning on her cane. I was a girl, too young to vote. But I remember the bells. They never stopped ringing, and when they did, it was for a wedding, not a burial. Sansa herself brought the grain that kept my mother alive. Sir Lan smiled. My mother called her the Fox of Winterfell. She said Sansa's cleverness was like a lantern in a blizzard, soft but always enough to find the door. Willa knelt, placing a single pebble on Sansa's grave. It's strange, isn't it? All these years, and what I remember most, is the way she listened. How she made the boldest lord or the shyest girl feel their word would matter. That's what built this place. Not laws or swords or even that bell, just the habit of listening. Nguyen. Sir Lan added his own pebble, black and smooth, worn by the river. Do you think she'd recognize us now? Willa gazed up at the tangled canopy, sunlight dappling her face. I hope so, but maybe we're not meant to be recognized. Maybe we're meant to keep changing, so the next child, or the next stranger who stumbles north, can find their own place here. They stood in silence, feeling the ancient roots thrumming underfoot, the sense of belonging deeper than any vow. The rest of the realm bustled on. The stone causeways between Winterfell and White Harbor were busy with carts and wagons. Skagos built ships, their hulls reinforced with weirwood ribs, carried grain and lumber as far as Old Town and the Summer Isles. The language of the Commons had grown broad, salted with the dialects of Valemen, Reach folk, wildlings, Ironborn, even Dothraki merchants, who now rode with their northern wives to the autumn moots. Every 2 years, the great census was held. A vast, intricate affair, with every town and steading sending delegates and ledgers to Winterfell. Names were read aloud, new citizens welcomed with the gift of a polished stone, and the oath recited by the crowd. Old wounds were remembered, and so were new grievances. Nothing was hidden, nothing left to fester. The Commons Hall echoed with voices, argument, laughter, grief, relief. Petitions were read, amendments to laws proposed and fiercely debated. Sometimes, The sessions ran into the night, the bell pealing above the roofs, summoning stragglers to the square for one last vote before dawn. It was not perfection, but it was peace. A peace that demanded ceaseless tending, like a garden. Famine and blight came again, as did floods and disease. But each time the stores were opened, and the wildlings taught the townsfolk how to hunt roots and net fish beneath the ice. The Bravosi enclave grew into a town within a town, its market square now a riot of color and foreign tongues. There was conflict, too. Drunken brawls, jealousies, the rare act of treachery. But always the commons met the crisis in the open, and the voice of the people settled it. The rangers still patrolled the old borders, but now more as mentors and guides than soldiers. Disputes between villages or with new arrivals were mediated by panels chosen at random from the commons, not imposed by ancient titles. The law was written down, argued, amended, and made anew with every generation. The youngest learners, called the Stones, were schooled together by elders from every clan and land, their first lesson always the same: to listen, to weigh, to speak with honesty. Once, a new threat came not from without, but from within, a charismatic orator, born of iron-born and free folk, who spoke in the markets of a strong hand, a return to rule by the bold and the ruthless. For a season, crowds gathered. A few in Wintertown and Skagos flirted with the idea, tired of slow debates and the labor of compromise. The Speaker's Council did not outlaw the movement nor silence its orators. Instead, they invited the agitator to stand for election, to make his case before the full chamber. The day came, and the hall overflowed. The orator gave his speech, fierce and stirring, full of promises to restore order and sweep away what he called the endless pebble talk. Then the council opened the floor. Willa Manderley, old now, voice rough but strong, stood to ask one question. And if your hand is strong enough to silence one, who here will choose to be the first? Silence. Then, one by one, folk rose. Old rangers, wildling elders, fisherwomen, children, to tell what they would lose if power belonged only to those who could take it, and what they had gained by having their word counted. When the vote came, it was nearly unanimous. The orator won a seat, but only as one voice among many. The commons endured, not by force, but by faith, that in the open, every ambition could be answered by reason and memory. Sansa's legacy did not fade. Each year, on the anniversary of the Republic's founding, her story was retold in every hall and field. How she had survived the cruelty of kings, endured the silence of winter, and learned the patience of listening. Children who never knew her name recited the oath and rang the stone bell. The tradition grew. On each founding day, every household cast its pebble, not just for the next law or the next speaker, but for a hope, a fear, or a thanks, words whispered, laughter shared, tears shed together. There was no statue for Sansa. She had forbidden it in her will, but her likeness was woven into tapestries, painted on shields, traced in chalk by children on festival nights. The heart tree in Winterfell's Godswood was her true memorial, its roots entwined with pebbles from every river and hill, its branches spreading shade over all who sought it. In the 100th year, a storm lashed the north for 9 days and nights. Rivers flooded, and the snows were late to melt. Food ran low, and the commons hall filled with the sick and weary. But no one was turned away, and every hand found a task. Hauling wood, tending children, singing to the bedridden. When the sun finally rose on the 10th morning, the people emerged, blinking and shivering, to find Winterfell still standing, the bells unbroken, the causeways passable, and grain enough for all. The speaker called a moot in the square. Old men and women, children, new arrivals, and born northerners, all gathered. A girl, no older than 8, stepped forward to cast the first pebble, and as she did, she spoke words that had come to mean more than any crown. I am the stone, you are the wall. I am the voice, you are the call. None stand above, and none below. We shape our fate in frost and snow. No, Eddie Sexer. A cheer went up. The bell tolled, deep and clear, and the people dispersed to work and rest, to hope and remember. Winter, spring, summer, and autumn spun their unending cycle. The North, once a kingdom of wolves and winter, was now something else. Fragile, resilient, ever-changing. Through every challenge, through every joy and loss, its people endured, not because they were the strongest, nor the richest, nor the most cunning, but because they remembered. They remembered what it was to listen, to stand together, to cast their stones and their stories into the heart of the world they had built. And beneath the boughs of the heart tree, where the roots pressed close around old bones and new seeds, Sansa's promise, simple, quiet, undiminished, echoed on in every voice and every season. The North endures. The Republic stands. Let all who seek shelter, all who seek justice, all who seek to be heard, come and be counted. Ka. Mist drifted over the new lake as dawn broke across a green spring, throwing pale ribbons through the woods outside Winterfell. For a long while, the world was silent, except for birdsong and the shush of wind across the reed beds. Then, gradually, life awakened. Rowers pushing skiffs off toward the White Knife, children slipping from the back doors of Wintertown's houses to race down the dew-wet lanes, and on the high walkways of the Commons Hall, bells rang for morning moot, summoning the deputies to session. The 115th year of the Republic had begun. Inside the great chamber, benches circled the floor. There were more than in Sansa's day, each carved with marks and names in a dozen scripts. On this morning, the benches held the usual array: weathered wildling clan leaders, fishers from Skagos, traders from Barrowton, Bravosi merchants with clipped accents, and rangers from the deep forests, whose faces were wind-burned and unreadable. There were even delegates from the south now. A brown-skinned reachwoman in the colors of the new commons of Old Town, a red-haired girl from the Free Cities, and a gray-bearded emissary of the Ironborn who wore a wolf and kraken badge and watched everything in careful silence. At the speaker's table, 3 stones, one of jet, one of blue glass, one of uncut granite, sat beside the bell and the new seal of the Republic, a stylized wolf entwined with a sheaf of wheat. Speaker Rowan, youngest ever to hold the office, rapped a gavel, and the session came to order. "Our first business is the renewal of the Grain Pact," Rowan announced, his voice both musical and measured, cutting easily through the early chatter. "We are to hear proposals from White Harbor, then the riverfolk." A slow, respectful hush fell. The old Manderley shipwright, Willa's granddaughter, rose. She spoke in the broad accent of her house, laying out the yields from the northern fields and the harbor's stores of dried fish and pickled greens. She explained that last year's surplus could see the whole north through even a poor winter, and that Skagos would be paid in ship timbers for every wagon of rye it ferried inland. The riverfolk delegate, a tall man with a voice like a bard, countered with talk of flood damage, of lost oxen, and the need for seed barley. But he also offered casks of the sweet white wine that only the valley vineyards could make, and an ancient stone tablet inscribed with part of the old First Men's Code. "Let the Republic's laws not only feed us," he said, "but bind us to memory." The vote was swift. Stones dropped into the copper bowl, each clack echoing. The pact was renewed, and the Riverfolk's Code would be added to the Hall of Records. Throughout the day, matters great and small unspooled. There was a debate over wildling hunting rights in the western woods, which ended with a joke, a new shared feast day, and a clause giving half the venison to orphanages. There was a dispute over whether the Skagos-born should be allowed to serve as speakers. It was settled by a simple amendment: anyone with a pebble could serve, provided they had once wintered on northern soil. During the midday break, the galleries filled with townsfolk and visitors. A troupe of singers from Old Town's Commons performed a new ballad in the square, "Pebbles in the Water," accompanied by flutes and the stomp of 1,000 feet. The refrain, "We build with our hands, not with crowns," "We choose for ourselves, not for thrones," was chanted with pride by children and elders alike. Old tales were told in the courtyard. The Bear Knight of Bear Island, who wrestled a kraken. The ranger who carried the first message to Skagos across the ice. The wildling healer who had broken the last fever. And always, the quiet girl who had become the first chancellor, who had shown the North how to listen. On the third night of the session, a wild storm battered Winterfell. Lightning flashed beyond the windows, thunder cracked overhead, and wind rattled the glass. In the Commons Hall, the deputies worked by lantern light, wrapped in cloaks, drinking strong tea as they argued over tariffs and floodworks, over how best to help the towns along the new lake that had flooded last year. The Ironborn emissary, his face lined by weather and years, stood and spoke. "In the old days, the sea gave, and the sea took. We feared only the strongest, and that strength was fleeting. Now I have sailed up the White Knife and traded with towns where no kraken banner flies, and not once have I been spat at or turned away. My children were taught to cast a stone, to speak, to listen. This is the only strength that endures." Now, his words were met with applause. The night wore on, the bell tolled, slow and steady, marking each vote. At dawn, the storm broke. A double rainbow arched above the keep. The speaker declared a festival day. Children poured from the houses and filled the market square. Food was shared, and a great game of moot began, each child arguing for their chosen treat or tale. In the Godswood, the apprentices of the hall read aloud the names of the year's new citizens, every child born, every stranger welcomed, every old soul who had at last chosen to belong. The Republic's heart beat on, not in the grand decrees of distant kings, but in the pulse of every life interwoven, each season and stone marking the North's passage through time. In later years, stories would be told of this era. The long peace, the great moot, the year of rainbows, the stone bell ringing clear over 100 settlements. Travelers from the south marveled at the roads, the open markets, the laughter of wildlings and nobles' kin alike. Some called it the North's New Age, though the North folk simply called it the time when we listened well. Each year, the festival returned. Each year, the hall grew a little more crowded, the tapestry of the Republic a little more intricate. The bells tolled. The stones were counted. The oath was spoken by old and young alike, in voices sure and unafraid. "We are the stones. You are the wall. We are the voice. You are the call. None stand above, and none below. We shape our fate in frost and snow." Nemexio. And as the sun set on each day, Sansa's promise endured, neither carved in marble nor sung from high towers, but living, breathing, resilient, in the thousandfold voices of a people who remembered how to choose themselves. The North at last had become a land where each story mattered, a republic in the truest sense, and a home for all who would cast their stone and be heard.